because otherwise, yeah, I was just saying, folks, this is about getting Sabrina's feedback, because you've heard me witter on about INTJ in that video, and then I did that longer video that was about 3 hours. And so this video is where Sabrina, Dr. Sabrina, is the star, and to get the feedback.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, so do you want me to? I'll wait for a question, and then.
No, I thought you were gonna.
I can do that. I can do that.
INTJ'd out all of your feedback.
Oh well,
into like a long present.
Well, I was going to say, you have my, that I have my notes handy and all my thoughts.
Okay, well, what we could do is maybe we could do it. If I show some of the slides
right
now.
Well, in particular, I will say that this is I looked primarily at the club slide for Model V, and then the other two that we talked about, and have definitely, like I said, I've made my notes and so if you want to pull up.
Yeah, I'll we could do it maybe bit by bit, or you could tell me to go to a certain bit. Okay, so, and if we go like that, I don't know what the best way to do it is, whether it's to do it like that. Well, it's strategic. It only covers it up a little bit. If folks out there, just remember that it's coordinators and constructors, and that's what it covers up. So, in terms of what you wanted to see, did you want to see that or any of these particular slides?
Well, I was going to say either the club whiteboard or this one works. One of the things that I really like about your model, and just about the way that you are approaching analyzing type in general, is that invariably, whenever I have run into a problem where I'm thinking, this seems like it's right, but there's something missing, you've addressed it, because you've definitely been able to look at all of the different, well, you have taken the time to look at all of the different modern, and in some cases, early last century type theories, and pulled them all together quite well. What I love about the whiteboard is that for many years, I've said, when I look at some of the other cognitive function models, I have felt that I agreed with NiTe, but then whenever I've ever taken a test that is supposed to measure cognitive functions, what ends up happening is I'm Ni, then Ne. Just, and then I will be TE, then TI, and then the others come in order, and then it will come out INTJ. Plus the regular Myers-Briggs, INTJ. Kersey temperament sorter, INTJ. Every so often, maybe a little bit that I and the E are kind of in the middle. But I definitely feel that captures how I operate, and also how I see working with students as well.
Right, I'll try to pull up where some of these ideas have come from. I'll have to go into. So if you talk a little bit more while I get a couple of slides.
Okay. Well, definitely. Whenever I have thought about how the intuitive, especially the introverted intuitive or NI processes, it's always associated with some sort of mysticism or magical. And I think it's because we're often known for saying, oh, we have aha moments. But when it really comes down to it, I don't think is as mystical. To me, it's more of we're constantly taking things in, here, there, and everywhere. And then at sort of on the back end of the brain, things are working in idle. And then at some point, when it comes time for us to make a decision, or when it's done, it sort of, I always say, it comes in like a tornado. It's like all of the debris and all of the information that's up front sort of funnels down, and we have a decision, or we have an insight. And But I would also turn around and say that in my particular case, that once I had that tends to come from things that I've got lots of experience with, and that with NE, while it's not my preference, when I have a lot of experience in a given topic and am asked to offer ideas, I can shoot off and go in those various directions, very much like somebody who has that as a dominant preference. And I think that's why many times people who have known me for years, they would probably see that a lot. Why? Because they come to me for ideas. And then that's a perfect example of where I think you've mentioned this in your videos. You can have a preference, but then sometimes you take on a particular role and an education. And then within the position that I'm in, as an instructional specialist, I help people integrate technology into the classroom. I also help them use technology to drive their instruction. And it's a combination of problem solving and idea generation. And so for me on a daily basis, I live in NI, and then it turns back out as NE. So, do you pull this up? Yeah.
Because I just wanted to get something from. So that I think the first person, because I do think that, because we know that Vanderhook was referenced a lot. It was referenced about 10 times in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually disappointed at how few people appear to have read Conscious Orientation, because a lot of people relatively have read Gifts Differum. And Conscious Orientation was mentioned it's in the bibliography of, maybe the title put people off, but it was mentioned in the bibliography of Gifts Different, and he's quoted 10 times.
Well, do you think it's possible we're thinking in 2022 terms, in terms of access?
It might be that, in terms of getting old books.
Books, because
I got it as an ex-library book.
Well, I just ordered it off of, I think it's Routledge, which is a UK publisher.
Because originally it was Keegan Paul, yeah.
Yeah, and so I just ordered a paper copy, and it's something that does not come available all the time. They may do a limited publication of it, and maybe based on interest, and then there's no more left, and then you see them for like $100 on Amazon.
So it also might be now with the digital print, where they do like a print on demand. Sometimes it's a pretty poor. I'm cleaning it up.
Right.
Pretty poor reproduction where it looks like they put it through a photocopier.
Right,
and
exactly.
And they put it and it's all slanted. Because I remember those first print on demand books were awful. I had one of Aristotle, and it basically was like someone had done it on a photocopier, but it was just ink that wouldn't run.
Yeah.
If you got water on it. So I think these are, I mean, there's no other way to interpret these, because it doesn't actually say in the text, NFs or ethos, but it's like there's no other way to sort of read it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when you look at that, all of those are all, when I first saw that graphic, the first thing that I thought about was arguments and stating a point, because we often talk about logos, ethos, and well, usually it's pathos and technique in order to construct a sound argument. You need all of those things in there. And then I thought, well, I wonder if that's where he pulled those terms from.
Well, I think that it's like with Linda Behrens. Like sometimes with Linda Behrens, it's like, okay, that's a 3/4 fit.
Right.
And it's like so you can see ethos for NFs and logos for NT.
Ethical, yes, because it's logical. You could also probably have a little bit of argument that it could also lean, it's thinking, definitely.
But morality, that's like SFJs, yes.
But not
SFPs,
no,
not so much.
not so much. No. And Well, and that's what I found with my research when I looked at the technology, temperament, and proficiency. Your ST students did better than the SF students, but then and ST artisan students did better than the SF artisan students.
What we could say though is they did better at those subjects
Eh, right.
that are easier to measure, especially in America when it's
Yes,
multiple choice and you've not
absolutely.
got. Oh, I would have a proposal
Hmm.
for the teachers. You are getting
Hmm.
fewer holidays, but you never have to mark any homework ever again.
Oh
And
gosh,
I would
yeah.
have separate people mark it and
Hmm.
not know the names of the pupils so that they're
Hmm.
really marking it
Looking
objectively.
objectively, yep.
And that would be the job for the ISTJs. You can
Oh
mark
yeah,
the
they need that
homework and
stuff
then
up.
have the teachers teach.
Yep.
Because teachers
Well,
hate marking. I mean,
yeah, they
is that
do.
true? They hate
There's a
marking.
lot of truth. There's a lot of truth to it, and especially, well, and that's that's how we've ended up with multiple choice tests. I think that I growing up in Bermuda, I was educated under the British school system. I came back to the States as an adult. Well, technically an adult. I was 18, and going back to a multiple choice test, it was a little frustrating for me because I was like, well, I could think of all of the exceptions to the rules, and you couldn't write those down. And so then it became, okay, now I have to learn how to break this test down. It's a whole different mindset. I don't think that multiple choice tests necessarily measure anything more than basic comprehension and some application. But if you really want to know what they do, you definitely need something more open ended. But yeah,
Oh,
the when it came to the way that those things are measured, a lot of your technology tests, it really does depend on what they're measuring, but what standards they're measuring, and again, and how they're measuring, and if it's really truly the best way for those topics. But yeah, you're looking at the clubs, definitely. Yeah, you can see the ST,
yeah, I'm just gonna.
NT, SF,
Yeah, I'll just put.
and NF.
I'll zoom in on INTP here
Hmm.
and just look at like how much is given to NI. And I like the little wrinkle that he added about when he gave the depiction
Hmm.
of the sort of like the introvert and the extrovert, and then where he said, and he had that idea that the introvert has more access to the unknown self,
Hmm.
and the extrovert has more access to the unknown world. And I thought that's an interesting concept.
Hmm. Well, and and in education, we would look at that as the intrapersonal intelligence and interpersonal
Yeah, yeah,
intelligence.
yep. Big
Hmm.
correlation there. And
Very
like,
strong.
I'm sorry, ESTPs and ENTPs, you have a problem with the unknown self.
Oh,
Right.
well, yeah.
Um. So, oh, that might work. Yeah, if I try to get to visual aids, because I can try. I want to show something about the clubs, about
Hmm.
where another source for them, and the actual
Hmm.
source of the word. Because I
Hmm.
always want to show the roots.
Exactly.
Because
That
I want
makes
to be honest about what I've come up with and what
you've
and
tied
where
them
it's. And
together.
usually it's a combination of. Yes, we have 3 viewers, and you are free to type in the comments, folks, in the
Hmm.
live stream. Uh, uh, Now, so Sabrina, did I
Hmm.
put that in about? I'll put the board in. So that's Model 80s. I call it Model 80s because the decade it's stuck in, Model A, and
Ah,
it's named
gotcha.
after
Yes.
my Model Austria. But and I also like sometimes I think, can't I sell this as modern art? Um, so we've got let's do your quadra. So
Let's say
gamma,
there.
the gamma
Uh,
there, and now ENTPs with their credible BS, and they want to like the way this was arranged,
hmm.
and people in socionics don't really talk about it this much. They talk about, oh, these are mental, these are vital, as if all of these are unconscious and these are conscious. Like, I think you're aware of your FI, Sabrina. So it's like they don't really talk about, because what it did is, what she did was copied the ideas.
Mm-hmm.
The ENTP frequently wants to piggyback on other ideas, in that for the ENTP, the threshold of, it's like, if it's a sort of a metaphor or an explanation
Mm-hmm.
that gets the rough idea across to a lot of people, the
Mm-hmm.
ENTP is happy with that. The INTP is not happy with that. The INTP wants it super accurate, but then gives a more complex explanation.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, as I always say, when I think INTP, they have their series of if-then sequences that they've got. You know, there's a flow chart that goes with their explanation. Yeah. And if they reach a dead end, it's time to go back.
And I think it's also part of the FI in there. In that ENTP doesn't care about misleading people. There's like INTP doesn't want to dumb it down and like miss out factors.
Yeah.
And so
you just never know.
I think and I think INTP is probably the most factorial. When David Kersey talks about the word usage of NTs and personology, it's super bang on for INTPs. So, but the thing in Model A is that they would have. Oh, I have another graphic where the actual rows are named, and I better put that up. If I had one for. Oh, is that all of them? Right, because then I can do the one for INTJ, because that's what we're having feedback on.
Okay.
So, INTJ, or ILI in socionics, was nicknamed Balzac. And if you look at Balzac, I won't say what it looks like, but the person who found out and I said what it looked like didn't like when they found out that it looked like that, and that particular person doesn't look like that person anymore because that person lost a lot of weight, and so no longer I can say that it looks like a certain person.
Oh, okay.
But if you look up Balzac, and I'll maybe show you a statue, and then you can keep to yourself who it looks like. But
okay, don't do it right now. Like literally do it.
Yeah. If you look it down, Google image Balzac, maybe statue. There's like a green statue of Balzac somewhere, and I might try and show it on screen if I get the right one.
Wait. Is it Bowser or Balzac?
Balzac.
Okay.
Oh my god! If you go on Wikipedia, unordered Balzac, just the picture.
Okay.
Anyway, this is a bit of an in-joke for people because we're not going to actually mention who it is.
Let's see.
Yeah, if you just see the picture on Air de Balzac on Wikipedia.
Okay.
Hang on a minute, he's got a photograph, and that must have been one of the earliest photographs then. Oh.
Okay. Okay, do me a favor and tell me how to spell this last name.
Balzac. Anyway, I can put it. I'll save it.
Okay,
let
me. Oh, there we go.
I'll put it on screen for people, and then in case this person watches the video. So you know. So so does it look like the person I think it looks like?
Oh my gosh! Are you still friends?
Yeah, we're still friends with him. Yeah.
Wow.
It doesn't look like that now, but he used to.
No.
Did you used to be friends with this person when he used to look like that?
No.
Allegedly.
No, it was after the fact.
Right. Because he's got videos on this. Anyway, we should.
Yeah, he does have old videos. I went back and I was like, wow. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I kept
'cause
getting Super Mario.
he does think that he doesn't look like him. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on screen for people. And then I'm going to say, well, folks, if you look through the videos on this channel, you'll see a certain person from a few years ago who used to look like this.
He does. He does. He
Right
does.
there.
See, what you need to do is if you get one of his old pictures and use that filter to kind of, the black and white.
Anyway, so
I think we need to both be put in timeout. That's
right. But here's Vanderhoot. Do you think he might
Okay.
be INTP? He's
Just a
taking the
little
idea.
bit. Just a little. Just a little.
Like he takes the idea, like he comes up with Zorro 10 years after, maybe.
Mhm.
But you know. Oh yes, can you see that? Oh yes. I don't know if you have the chat in the side, Sabrina, because you have the private chat, but not the chat where it shows the comments.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
sorry. After 10
and
years.
I'll put the comments on screen when they're
Okay.
apropos. But in
Okay.
terms of like going INTP, in
Mhm.
terms of okay, I'm gonna like come up with this idea and these rings, and
Mhm.
then it's like I think, oh, that's quite INTP, and then like take it to the next level and go as far as you can with now interestingly probably religious Vanderhoot in the
Mhm.
way he and also the way he writes about like he described himself as polarized in that
Mhm.
he had integrated his feeling, which is possible if someone's an INTP and they've been a counselor for about 20 to 30 years, they're going to access
Mhm.
a lot of their feeling.
Mhm.
But anyway, we're getting a little bit off the topic, and so
Yeah, but it's you're going back, just sharing the history.
yeah. So yeah, in terms of clubs,
Mhm.
it was a thing that was in socionics where these are the strong rows, and so it's in there that like the NT functions are strong
Okay.
in INTP, but and they have that as they would call that demonstrative and the ignoring. Well, what it gets translated from Russian anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just that I didn't like the arrangement of because it's all copied from Freud. It's like piggybacking on Freud to go
Mhm.
ego row, super ego, super id, and id. But it's like these are not unconscious.
Mhm.
So it's not a useful, this arrangement to me is not useful.
Yeah.
But if there's one thing you can do is if you mentally turn it sort of sideways
Mhm.
and you get if you see each of these as a column, so NITE, FESI, FISE, NETI, and if you remember those as blocks, and then when you see model V, or when I'm feeling extra self-promotional model Vaserlan,
Mhm.
then that's the wrong one, it's up here. Then you can see you got the NITE, TINE, FISE, SIFE, but I've arranged it so that you can clearly say within the model strongest to weakest.
Right. That makes
Now,
it. Yeah.
some of these vary a little bit, and off Dario Nardi's data, just depending on development. So, for example,
Mhm.
if someone's an INTJ counselor, they're going to develop pretty strong FI, and
Mhm.
if you tested them and you did a long interview, you might have some INTJs with stronger FI than NE.
Mhm.
But Dario's data would be, and that's something else that sort of validates the clubs. Is hopefully I have the slide. There it is. And this is, have you got Dario's book, The Magic Diamond?
I believe it. Yes, I do. Hold on. Let me grab it.
And Sabrina, could you show the audience a certain page?
Okay.
There's a certain page in the book and a certain paragraph I'd like you to read, a bit of a paragraph to read out.
Okay.
So if you see the middle paragraph on page 424,
424.
Yeah, and then if you
Furthermore, or a tricycle
and if you read out the final sentence on there,
of the tricycle.
yeah,
For example, for ISTJ, it is apparently more accurate to say SITX, where TX indicates both TE and TI rather than saying SITE.
right, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Now, where that came from was that I was sitting on the fence in
Mm-hmm.
Victor's model because he had LII, so that's INTP, as
Mm-hmm.
he had it as LT, which
Mm-hmm.
translates to TINI. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh, where's my NE? Where's my NE? I like NE.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an NE person. And then I saw like the validity of that, and so I thought, okay, Dario and the MBTI people have got TINE. I can see that. I can also see TINI, and so I thought I'll sit on the fence and I'll call it TINX.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I use that notation
Mm-hmm.
on my videos. And then Dario saw that notation because he also read about what is called the sixth function from the Beebe model. And so he
Okay.
knew that that function could be strong. And he
Mm-hmm.
thinks that function becomes strong. It depends on development.
Well, what I would be interested in, Eric Erickson's psychosocial crises, I believe there are 8, if memory serves me. And I would imagine that you could take these functions and you could pull them down with the psychosocial crises and then look and see that's about the time that we probably develop those various things. Not that it's kind of a side to it, but I think that that's why a lot of times too, the older people are, the more we see they sort of come center to a certain
Yeah,
extent. And my kids tease me all the time. They say that I've gotten soft in my old age. I'm not the mom that raised them. I'm tougher on them than I've ever been on my grandson. So, and I could say the same thing about my father. My father's an ENTJ who thinks he's an ENFP these days, and I know that that's just being a
Oh,
grandparent. Now
what
he's a great
about,
grandparent.
and also, what about the Guardians when they get older and how they end up, especially the STJs?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
what about Yuri Gatan in that
yeah.
video where he's having those NE moments?
And
And
you
it's,
going, where did that come? Look, do you know my ex-husband salsa dances? I would have, and he was an ISTJ. For the life of me, when he told me that, I was like, really? Are you serious? And I just sat there for a while. This was at my grandson's birthday a few years back. Him and his wife were there, and we were talking. And when I heard he salsa dance, I was like, I need to see this on video. I could not believe it. But again, it goes back to, you get to a certain point in life and you start developing some of those other areas, and you maybe a little bit more willing to explore things that you wouldn't explore, as well as just life has a tendency to push things on you that are going to make you have to reevaluate how you interact.
yeah. So with there's a graphic. This one might help with because it sort of gets some organizing principles in it. So that would be like that row, the B4 hot side,
Mm-hmm.
and where you've got, it's like even Dario has talked about his inner ESFP.
Inner ESFP.
Yeah, and I have it with and where, and I see it as, it's like the soul image. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
animal or animus is like that
Mm-hmm.
internal
Mm-hmm.
side. And I think with the socionics concept of duality,
Mm-hmm.
if you've got, like, I've seen it in a video with, say, Thrain, and like he's an Australian guy, but also from Burma. And you're like, oh, I don't care. I'm calling it Burma. And it's like, yeah,
Okay.
you're effing polar. Right.
Okay.
So I'm going it. He's like very Australian, but also Burmese
Got
in
a little bit
Myanmar.
of. Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting seeing him doing videos with Emily D. Emily D. Who I would sort of classify as, and so she was in her 30s at the time, early
Mm-hmm.
30s at the time, I hasten to add. And it was just a few years ago, folks. so I'm not aging her.
Right.
And I sort of put her as like no doubts about it, she is an accomplished person.
Hmm.
And so with like starting her own Spanish business, and she learned Spanish by traveling to Latin America. And I mentioned her yesterday
Hmm.
in the ESFP video, and she was, as an ESFP, also someone interested in typology, and she was doing the personality hacker course.
Hmm.
But in seeing her interact with Thorane,
Hmm.
and then Thorane as an INTJ, someone who's interested in, and Emily D
Hmm.
is married. Um, that she, and my point there being that those two were ready for duality, in that you could say with Emily that she is an ESFP with like strong ESFP abilities, and like I mentioned how she worked in a children's home for girls,
Hmm.
and it's like, so she's got the SE stuff. But I
Hmm.
would say about her, she's got a strong inner INTJ,
Hmm.
and you could say with Thorane that he has like a strong ESFP.
Yes.
And if you took two people like that personality wise in terms of
Hmm.
a couple, they are then ready for duality, and you could then say that they are opposite sides of the same coin.
Oh, so well,
But
I.
yeah,
Hmm.
but I'm going to give the other contrast, and then I'll shut
Hmm.
up. The other contrast is, if you have at one extreme, if you have, say, Charlie Sheen ESFP at
Yeah.
one extreme, and then you have the Uber INTJ at the other extreme, they are so different from each other, and their B sides are so undeveloped
Hmm.
that they wouldn't be ready
Right.
for duality.
Makes sense. Well, I think I've told you, and I may have said this on a stream before, that I worked with a lady several years ago when we first started in our positions. She was this instructional specialist at the school. I was a technology instructional specialist, and she was having some challenges um, getting to know the faculty and staff, because whenever they have an instructional specialist position, they don't let you do it in the school that you were in. They move you to another building. And so anyway, we got to talking about she said, Sabrina, I swear, no matter what I say, I get in trouble, but you don't. And I told her, I said, well, that's because, I said, well, that's because you're an orange blue girl, but basically an ESFP. And I'm an INTJ, which was a green gold. And I said, the culture of education is very gold, or very guardian. And I said, and so sometimes you have to translate into their language in order to communicate. And one of the things that I learned about her was that she had the ability to reach any child. And I, to this day, credit her for helping me understand that in a way that I had never had before. In the technology lab, for the most part, kids pretty much enjoy what they're doing. And if they don't like what you have to teach them, there's always a game or something else that they can get a hold of. Um, but eventually they leave technology. She's the type of person that could keep kids engaged all the time, because she used to say, I got bored easily as a student. I get bored easily as a teacher. And so she would be very quick to change things and be very aware of the mood of the classroom, the level of interaction, the level of engagement. So I do think that whenever you can match people up, but yeah, like, not like when you said Charlie Sheen, I just shudder to think of having to be paired with somebody like that in any group setting. But you have folks that have those opposites. I do think that there's a wonderful complement, because to a certain extent, you get you can cover everybody.
So, I would an example would be, if so someone on the channel, say you
Hmm.
got an INTP scientist, and then you've got, and that INTP scientist, say, met Dr. Julia,
Hmm.
who's a ESFJ neuroscientist. Then the INTP he's going to be like, yes. Just like if you have, like, say, an ESFJ. How about this? Say you had an ESFJ working in psychology, because I think that's definitely possible, because the real life Rena was like doing a psychology degree, and they're interested in people. So I can imagine ESFJs in psychology, especially like if it's with children, so like they're helping people in psychology. And then some sort of comment there. I've not read it yet. Oh, right, I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, and also you've got 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, which is a bit more in business speak, and it's sort of aimed more towards a lot of Enneagram 3s. And I think it's obvious which 4 functions are Dario's favorites in that book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership. And I'm going to actually digress onto that at the moment, because we are talking about INTJ, and
and he's
like, he loves his SE. Because like the way he talks about SE, it's like you and Prince.
Oh, I love
it's
Prince.
Like SE is his Prince function. Like there's a description of SE. I'm just trying for. Did you get 8 Keys, Sabrina?
I'm looking to see if I have that in this or if I have it in Kindle. Hold on one sec. Let me take a quick look. Neuroscience.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I'm just going to show this for you. Right, so here's the language that Dario uses for.
I think I have that. I'm pretty sure I have that in Kindle.
Yeah, so here's the language that Dario uses for.
I have this one though.
For SE. So I'll just give a bit of the build-in sentence.
Okay.
Cooperation yields many qualities. For example, when we look at extroverted sensing with introverted feeling as preferred processes, we see a richer pattern. And now he goes into his love letter to so again, this is SE with FI, which just happens to be SFP. A person flows with a sense of pace, rhythm, and process, with quick and easy responses to situations, and often has personal style. He or she is a hands-on experiential learner and is good at asking questions, offering suggestions, presenting ideas, and creating products and making helpful comments. This person notices and gets in sync with non-verbal information and shows spontaneous and genuine expression. Each of these qualities reflects an awareness of personal identity and what's important to oneself and others in an immediately relevant, tangible, and helpful way.
That is Karen. That is the woman that I worked with. When you said that,
I bet you liked her.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, what I mean is, it's like when I think about her as an educator and the things that, like I said, I love being a storehouse of knowledge. I love when kids, hey, how do you do such and such, and I have the answer. And sometimes I can go on my diatribes and forget, oh wait, I'm talking to children. And Karen does just. That's Karen encapsulated in that book, and it was everything that I admired about working with her. She retired early because she started right out of I always say started out of elementary school teaching, but yeah, she I miss her because of that, because whenever I ran into problems that I felt were on that humanistic nature, she would be the first person that I would call, because things would just and it would be effortless.
Right, so that's duality. That is an example of duality. And you've got there, and again, as an example of, dare I say it, a more intellectual ESFP. Whereas if you had the party, unless you had Charlie Sheen,
oh, we're not.
You wouldn't be able to communicate as well.
Nope. Well, and
or Paris Hilton. Like, I don't know what Paris Hilton's like. I'm thinking about Paris Hilton 20 years ago. She may have completely changed.
Well,
a bit like Pamela Anderson's changed quite a bit.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that because my son, ENTP son, has always said that he felt that she was running, as he puts it, she was running game on all of us. He said that he felt he's always just felt that she did a lot of what she did by design. Yeah, I know that I have that. I just am thinking that I have it in Kindle.
Yeah, and then yeah, I'm just sort of showing that for the people.
And then I've got this. I was going to
in
say,
the
and then
chat.
this is his other one here.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That was this was the first one of his that I got, if memory serves.
And he's got the temperament in there. You can see that he comes from that Kersey tree.
Mhm.
I call it, so that's why I call those types the
Mhm.
KBN types, the Kersey, Berens, Nardi. They're all
yeah.
really the same type.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I because I remember when that first, and I first started, I was so excited because to me he was giving, or at least exploring, the scientific, okay, for those who doubt, let's show you something concrete, because apparently that's that's what you need in order to believe it, though a lot of us know that it's true. And I remember that being extremely excited about his work.
So, Sabrina, in terms of feedback on this model and some of the notes, let's try and get through all the bullet points.
Okay, let's go through. Okay.
Made.
Okay. Well, I was let's see. Do you have this one here? I was looking at.
Yeah, I'll just go to your. I'll just magnify you a bit so I can see, and then I'll put on screen.
Because you were asking specific when you were asking about what I thought about what it was that you wrote in regards to what he said on one of these.
What, Dario?
No. Oh, I thought you were talking about this here. I apologize.
Oh yeah, it's just anything in like in terms of feedback on the model. We sort of covered clubs, that it was an idea that was, I think we can say Vanderhoek came up with it first, and then
definitely
probably Myers-Briggs, in that I think originally they wanted to do it as the clubs.
And she called them function pairs, didn't she?
Maybe, like those middle two letters.
Middle two, yeah.
But the question is, when did they read Vanderhoek? And were they inspired by Vanderhoek? Because we know they knew about Vanderhoek when they did Gifts Different. And I think Gifts Different came out in 1980. So we don't know whether they came up with that. They probably came up with it independently, maybe, but we know that by 1980 they knew Vanderhoek.
Well, I can say that I can say this, just having gone through the research process myself. It is quite possible that they stumbled upon it accidentally, because when I did mine, I looked at Kersey temperament, through the lens of True Colors with the students. And I noticed, and I think I've mentioned that, I've noticed that the artisan temperament, when we looked at the national test, which had a lot of engineering type standards on it and engineering type questions, that when it came to the artisan temperament, it was a hit or miss. And so then I had to look at the secondary elements, and I realized, oh, well, if they had a feeling preference, they didn't do as well on these areas. But if they had a thinking preference, they did. And so then I was like, wait a minute, that's Myers function pairs. And then I started going back, and I realized, okay, so this is it. NT and NF work. Yeah. Why? Because they were already the function pairs. It was this other one that didn't quite work.
A great disappointment for me is that it appears that David Kersey Sr. never read Conscious Orientation. And again, it's a shame, but maybe it was hard to get a hold of the book. Like, given that Conscious Orientation was mentioned in Gifts Different, and maybe he hadn't have been like as turned off by MBTI. Like, if he maybe read that book in 1980, and maybe remember, saw those quotes from Vanderhoek.
Please Understand Me came out in 78, though.
Yeah, but what I'm sort of saying is, it's a shame that, like, after that, he didn't like, because my personal thought is that he would have mentioned him, because he would have said, like, Vanderhoek's SI, he's describing my guardians.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Like, he mentions the conservative farmer that does everything in the same old way. And he sort of paraphrases that line about doing something in the same old way and looking towards an authority. And it's like 3 or 4 ways. It's like SI Dom AF.
Yep.
And I think that he would have been far less frustrated by Vanderhoek than he was by Jung. Like a lot of the mysticism was taken out of, well, not the mysticism, it's just that Jung is complex with the way NI works, with the way the image, and what he meant by image was a fantasy image that is a blend of conscious and unconscious.
Right.
And it's complicated, and it's like, in order to understand to get his mechanism, you have to, but Jung was going off, he got to his theory of archetypes empirically. And he said in his interview that he wondered if he was projecting, that maybe he was putting it into his patients. And so he wanted to look at case studies from other therapists to see if these themes were coming up, these archetypal themes. And so his TI was based in TE.
Yeah.
So
well, the thing, he was worried, and then he realized that he studied, looked at other patients that were treated by other therapists, and realized that was the same. And then also when you looked at he studied and looked at the literature as well across different cultures, and you have similar archetypal patterns regardless. And we write about the same characters.
And then Joseph
Campbell took that, and he did A Hero with 1,000 Faces. Yep. And then from there, then you also then you had The Hero's Journey, Hero with 1,000 Faces. Chris Vogler did that, and then that's where you have the whole thing with George Lucas, and it's just kind of all blown up. And now there are lots of other writer folks that have taken those, and basically, you start, at least in this day and age, we credit Jung because we're able to trace it, and we have more like you said, we have more printing presses, we have digital technology, we're able to have that kind of access. But chances are there might have even been somebody before Vanderhoek. It's just a matter of somebody unearthing.
So do you remember back in the day how hard it was to get books that were out of print?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. There was Dover Books when I was, and I feel like the lady from Titanic. It's been 84 years, but remember Dover Books used to sell out of print books at a reasonably, that they had to have been in the public domain for so long before they did that. And if you couldn't find it on Dover Books in their catalog, it was much harder. And interlibrary exchanges, much harder.
Oh, another reason why, again, it's such a damn shame that Kersey never wasn't aware of consciousness, because he loved this book, Physique and Character, and Vanderhoek writes a lot in this book about that book.
Oh.
But because Vanderhoek objects to the schizothymes being presented as introverts, because Vanderhoek says, and again, this is like 1937 and this is like 1925, Vanderhoek says, but there are extroverted autists. Because I think what Kersey did is he looked at physique and character, and because I think and Vanderhoek thinks that basically Kretschmer's schizothymes were introverts.
Okay.
But the question is, when Kersey looked at physique and character, did Kersey, I think there's two options. One is Kersey thought, he's describing NTs. He's describing abstract types as schizothymes. Option B, he thinks he's describing introverts, but I think, because I'm an INTP, he's describing abstract types. Because INTPs will take someone's theory and change it up.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Like he critiques. You've got Vanderhoek critiquing Jung. It's like, I agree with this bit, but I don't agree with that bit.
Right.
And so that's why I think it's such a crying shame.
Yeah. But, and so much of it is based on our lenses and the community that we work with. Kersey worked with students. It's like I worked with students in a military community. I see I would argue till I'm blue in the face about the proportions of certain types in our community being different. Let's
Yeah,
see, where's
so
that?
this
Okay.
is the names. Now, I think this would have been a great book. It's like, so for the INTPs in the 1920s, and it's like, where did they get the INTP books? And I think a lot of these are like INTP books. And I'm going to adjust this to
Okay.
try and make myself. Here we go. So I think, so you got these names of these subjects. I think INTPs, I think the NTs would be interested in these kind of books.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
One of these names just amused me. It sounds like a book for children. How animals find their way about.
This sounds like something from Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
In a tree.
And there's an interesting one. The Art of Interrogation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, these are books for the INTP. It's like
Okay, Gestalt, conscious, or okay, psychological dynamics of education, the nature of learning.
yeah.
Oh
I think
yeah,
you're gonna find that interesting.
oh yeah.
Like, what did they think back in the day? Like Dynamics of Education by
Oh yeah.
Now that might
we
because
compare
that's a woman, because usually it would be a woman when they don't put the first name.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, there is one woman here, Helga Eng, for the psychology of children's drawings.
Oh, it's children too, though. Oh, okay.
So that's a separate book.
Early child. It's not that uncommon to find women in early childhood education even back then. Yeah.
But I'll just try and get it to focus.
Okay.
I get unlucky with the.
Yeah, the focus. Yeah. Let's see.
Oh, that's Hilda. The Dynamics of Education by Hilda Taber.
Hilda.
Is that Hilda, or
is it HIL? Let's see. It's just a little Taba.
I'll have a look at that one over there. Is that Hilda?
Yeah, it does say Hilda Taba. Hilda Taba.
Yeah, you could look her up. Yeah, Hilda Taba.
Hilda Taba.
Dynamics of Education. Because I think a lot in those days, education was more elitist, and so at the top level, it's like you got to know your Latin and your Greek, and you got to study the philosophy in the original language.
She was an architect and a curriculum theorist. Curriculum theorist, a curriculum reformer, a teacher educator. Wow, born in Estonia, 1902 to 1967. Interesting, and she has a model. Oh, definitely going to check her out. I will. Yeah, she will definitely be somebody to.
Oh, and that's a funny book as well. Have I mentioned the bits from this book before?
Which one is that?
The funny parts.
Is that one where it looks at your body and then it assumes that you're a certain type because of?
Well, it's not quite. Whoa! That's what it's like on Wikipedia, but like, it's very careful, and it says that you only sort of get a relationship between physique and character when someone is like a psychiatric patient, and the theory being that there's hormonal imbalances that have led to these physiological symptoms, these relationships, and that normal people are an admixture of physique and character.
Okay, that makes
but it's
sense.
the funny moments in the book where one of the translations. Did you see my ESFJ Model V?
ESFJ model. No, I just watched ESFP. ESFJ was last week.
May have been 2 weeks before.
Or 2 weeks ago.
And I mentioned this character called Gladys. And I talked about the Jolly Organizer, and I got that from Vanderhook.
Yes. Oh, you had her on. You pulled her up on screen.
Yeah. I put.
Yes, I did see that. I saw that. Yeah.
Different translation had the
whole
Jolly Organizer,
dashing organizer.
Yeah. And then
that's
again,
cute.
and then that
Pure
one had
idealists, depots, and fanatics.
Yeah, again. So I think those are introverts, or at least I think. But like Vanderhoop, it's like, oh, okay, Kretschmer, you think they're introverts, but like I said, he would have loved that book just for what he wrote. Like if we were doing this, just 15 years ago, and we got in there towards the end of the life of Kersey, and we could say, look. He talks about your guy Kretschmer on these pages, and he mentions him a lot. So I can show you in the contents. And it's all because these days, a lot of books And even Dario, where's the index, Dario? I'd like an index. A lot of these. So let's have a look at. Oh, I like this bit. Scotland. Introverts regarded as normal in.
Oh, okay. What implying that they're not normal anywhere else? Well, we're gonna have you move to Scotland, sir. Like, what do you do
could
with
say
that?
to Kersey, if I was trying to sell this book to Kersey, and if he was like, again, if this was 15 years ago, there's your Ernst Kretschmer.
There's your boy. Yeah.
There
you go. Look at that. He's there. Yeah.
Schizothymes criticized. Descriptions of schizoids, all what you were writing about. Damn shame.
Yeah. Well, but like I said, I do think that when it comes to availability, that has a lot to do with it. And I also think when you look back at it with, gosh, I could remember folks a little bit older than me saying how they had to do the interlibrary loans. He
resigned when Hitler came to power.
Oh,
and again, look, again, this book, 1925, he wrote outrageous business letters to the Jews, whom he cannot bear. So that shows like Kretschmer he's not an anti-Semite.
Got you. Wow.
But the read-up of this on, and again, maybe describing any dumb.
He wanders away from the subject, comes back. Yeah. That's the poster.
What with Ron never gets a word in edgeways. I'll try to, whilst you go on, I'll look for try and find the funny bits in this book, because I know I'm in an email.
That's hilarious. Well, yeah, it is a shame, because I think back to, there's so many things. The Kersey is definitely my favorite of all of the, although I like Myers-Briggs, but Kersey's work, I think I've told you the story before that I took Myers-Briggs and at work, and I was telling my father about it, and he handed me Please Understand Me. He said, "Oh, don't do that. This book, this is much better," and because it's so much more practical. Let's see.
So some funny moments. He was also a bee fancier,
as in bzzz.
Yeah. Quite as a pensioner in a little room of his own among old, worn-out folk.
Oh, wow!
The way this is written, this is definitely someone who knew comedy.
Wow.
It's like just the way it's like Douglas Adams, like P.G. Woodhouse, like phrasing of stuff, right? Just every now and then, because the other books just don't have it.
His office, he was good-natured, and what is that? Boisterous fellow.
Yeah, never meant anyone any harm. I should have gone for a funny. The funny stuff's in pink. I should have gone for the pink stuff. So
let's see.
They're timidly retiring like a mollusk without a shell.
Wow. Aww.
Black rubbish heaps. Here we go. The elitism. One cannot study the feasibility of all in its full from peasants.
Wow. Good enough. Ooh. There are schizophrenic for who can live for 10 years and not be able to say for certain that we know them a shy girl was. Wow. Interesting.
To a certain extent, these typologists were like, just the way they write, it's like
so
more intelligent than the people these days.
So were they like a series of case studies within that book? That's a lot of their as they're making those descriptions like that.
I just think what it is I just think it's an INTP with a flair. And he's just trying to crowbar in some comedy, and he can't help himself. Just because it's very subtle in his phrasings, and so. And then a bit here. Okay, then stuff. Fat loud.
Wow.
Or what is an indecency or a pearl of fairy lore? And it's just like putting these little bits in.
Oh wow. So let's say that he is. So in other words, these are psychological Easter eggs that only another INTP would catch on. Because I would imagine that you probably have others that have probably read that. And not notice those little things, or if they
maybe
did,
it's someone really into comedy, or like P.G. Woodhouse or Douglas Adams. They notice that this is phrased deliberately for comedic effect. I can see the technique here, just in the way it's worded.
Well, because you've got quite a few done like that, so there's probably it might have even been for levity.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes adding levity gives heavy subjects, gives you a little bit of a break of the intensity of what it is that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, like, here's an example of him being. Sometimes I've highlighted it when he's been like, and I like the fact that he's careful. In his where he talks about, oh, we don't know, it's an admixture, and he talks about degrees. Like the autism of the majority of schizoids and schizophrenics, however, is based on mixtures, and then he talks about degrees of the unsociability of schizoids has the most varied gradations. And then I'm trying to find there's a really good bit where he goes to lengths to describe the word thin in a funny way. Oh my god, that's a little bit just the elitism there.
Let's see.
We naturally shall not give any particular examples of the great mass of mediocre, simply lame and insensitive schizoids who are universally known and have no great psychological interest. If you want to see some great, but see my book on geniuses, because he did write a book on geniuses, and they're mostly Germans.
Well, you know that I was going to say you mentioned your
the description,
the language translation.
He
always wears a monocle.
Right, but there's a bit here where he talks about a German family tree, and he writes about a woman that fought in World War One as a man, and just the way he frames the last sentence is like good comedy stuff. So if you go on, I'll try and find that bit where oh yes, the gay chatterbox, that's a different one.
But now that means happy, right?
I know, but it's like it's still like funny even in its own way.
The chatterbox.
Yeah, and then we've got what we got. The world's here we go. That's INTP. By combining methods, it is quite possible to set in general psychological theory of temperaments on a firm basis.
On a firm basis.
Yeah,
combining methods. Isn't that what you're doing too?
Yeah. Then I'll try and find that bit. Oh, he uses the word get atable.
So he makes up his own vocabulary.
Nietzsche, schizothymic. Oh my god. Excessive growth of beard and brows.
As in like
mental imagery. It's excessive.
Excessive growth of beards and brows. So we're talking like Cro-Magnon, what do you call it? Neanderthal?
Yeah, a little bit like that, yeah. I want to find that bit with the family tree. Right, so I need to try and find that family tree where it talks about first of all, though, I'll mention the bit about the woman and what was the bit about page 22, and then I'll get to the right, here we go. So this is how he describes a thin person. A deficiency in thickness.
I think I'm going to take that.
Combined with an average unlessened length.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's like the build-up. Here's the build-up.
Combined with an average, wow.
Yeah, but it's like this bit. Like, there's no need to put this bit in. Is in a few words taking the general total impression, unless you're building up to a punchline. The essential characteristic of the type of the male ascenic is, in a few words, taking the general total impression, a deficiency in thickness, combined with an average unlessened length.
You have a deficiency in thickness. What did you just say?
I like the one in, if you want clever humour, like if you see Yes Minister.
Yes Minister, that's old.
And then when he said the perpendicular pronoun, it was I, Minister. Right, the perpendicular pronoun. Oh yes, here it is. I found it. Right, the description of the woman. Homosexual, completely masculine in feeling, went to the war in male clothes, wants to go in for politics.
Headstrong, shut up in herself,
morose.
Very low.
But that phrasing, wants to go in for politics, There's comedy
Wow.
phrasing there. That's Douglas Adams-esque.
Wow.
Like I said, going for the it's the way
He's
it's
going for the
written. He's
he's
going for the
definitely
gags, saying things in a funny way.
that's
Like
cool.
he's got to
That's
have been doing it
interesting.
when like the build up to, in a few words,
Yeah.
an
He's
absence
just
of
that's
thickness.
just let me just add this little bit right
Yeah.
here. Yeah, well, definitely the fact that you're able to you notice the patterns consistently throughout. Yeah, the chances are that's by design. That's not accident.
Yeah,
Because
that's
accident
doing
you
the
have one
humor.
or two, three funnies, but when you can go
Oops.
page to page to page, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw it because like these are the things I think about, or used to think about a lot
Mm-hmm.
before you sort of, because when you first start in the comedy writing, you're really looking at the technique. And well, I am
Mm-hmm.
like in an INTP way,
Mm-hmm.
seeing the build of sentences, and Douglas Adams did it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a quote about Douglas Adams. It was something like, he was a minutiae writer, Douglas. He worried. This is quoting Rhys Jones.
Mm-hmm.
He was a minutiae writer, Douglas. He worried a lot about the structure and weight of sentences and the quality of comedy words in them. To that extent, he meant that he was writing heavily thought over and carefully crafted comic weighted sentences.
Ah.
Because there was a point where I got really into it and I made a dictionary of comedy words, just words
Mm-hmm.
that sound funny,
Uh-huh.
and I put the
Such a
quote.
geek. I love it.
Getting geeky about comedy, where I put that
Yeah.
quote on there
Uh-huh.
about there. He was a pedant about comedy. He was a minutiae. Again, ENTP
Yeah.
AF for Douglas
Gotcha.
Adams. He
As
worried a
much.
lot
Yeah.
about the structure and weight of sentences and the quality of
Mm-hmm.
comedy words in it. To that
Mm-hmm.
extent, that meant as a writer, he was writing line by line, heavily thought over and carefully crafted comic weighted sentences. And so that's what I noticed in Van der Hoop. This
Gotcha.
is crafted.
This is crafted. Yeah, that's not. Yeah, it's not accidental. Definitely part of his style with a purpose, not just Yep. Going back, I was thinking going back to your model.
Yeah, I don't
One
know
of
how I got onto this. I think
we
because I was going on about Van der Hoop, and then I
Better.
went on
Well,
to
and
Kretschmer.
we were saying that it's such a shame that Kersey did not take advantage of. Well, I shouldn't say take advantage. That he did not necessarily. We don't know that he knew of it. And again, going back to when you think about it, some of these books had to be translated into English, and so even if the books were plentiful in one language, they
Yeah,
may not have been
But Laura Hutton, Laura not chained to. I always call her Laura not chained to a kitchen sink. Hutton, just like those other women that you saw, like you saw two of them at least on that list of
right, not
books.
changing.
What was it, Hilda Tabber?
Oh yeah, she was an architect. She was.
Yeah.
She's. Yeah, she was. Yeah, the theory of inductive
So it's
thinking.
like, but what I think was back in those days is that those sort of jobs and education opportunities were probably more open to women from more privileged backgrounds, and like your working class women are not going to have that access to education because it was more elitist.
I would also say that you probably had a lot more rational women that took those positions too in academia.
Yeah, so it's like when you look back at it, it's like they did have universities that let women in, and when did that start? What, late 19th century?
And it just varied. It varied on the. It varied on
because I remember
subject or the subject, the field.
They would have women's only colleges, I think.
Yeah. Well, the women that for throughout history, at some point, whether it was formal or not formal, you had women that were in midwifery.
Oh, there's a famous person from Jamaica. She was, I think she had a Scottish father and a black Jamaican mother. And only recently she's been honoured in like the past like 20 to 30 years. Mary Seacole. And she was a doctor in Jamaica, and she travelled to the Crimean War.
Oh wow!
And she said at the time she was called a doctress. Yeah, and they sort of trusted, and she was a friend of Queen Victoria, Mary Seacole.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, Mary Seacole, And I think they also maybe at some time they called her the brown woman or the yellow woman. I can't
The yellow,
quite
you're
in the
probably, yeah,
papers.
yeah.
Uh,
But
but
yeah, it's like I said, it's
Florence Nightingale also might have been the first person to like invent the pie chart, and she might have been more like ISTJ, like administrator of the hospital, rather than actual
yeah,
nurse.
yeah. Well, and like I said, that the thing is that when you look at when you look at hand washing, that came from the nurses who who were washed their hands between patients, and they had a lower mortality rate as a result of working with women and so on. So like I said, there's always been that. It's just that
Oh yeah.
they may have been limited in the hierarchy within an organization or within a hospital. Now it's not uncommon to find women in medicine, but again, still oftentimes they're okay. Well, obstetrics and gynecology,
I think
pediatrics.
I saw a program over 20 years ago. That might date me, folks, but it was that she believed Florence Nightingale in a theory of maybe contagion that wasn't correct, but because she went by the statistics, she got to the same result of we got to have these wards clean.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So
And
I'm
see,
thinking maybe ISTJ for her.
yeah. Well, and the thing is, you may, and it goes back to, yeah, you may have a hunch or a guess, and if she went specifically by statistics and followed it, yeah, definitely. I think you have to have a certain amount of guardian in you in order to stay in nursing.
So
Although I
many
think you mentioned,
guardians in medicine.
oh yeah, although you did mention the artisan nurse who liked to
Yeah,
be
got
in the
that from
ER.
got that from that example from Carol Linden.
Yeah, they like to be in the ER because it's fun, and that would change each day. So they would have something to look forward to that's different. Whereas your guardian is going to enjoy having a certain amount of routine. Let's call all those artisans in for the for the fun. But yeah, go back. Looking at going back to your model. One thing that I will say is that, and again, I guess I keep going. I harping on the club functions, and that you
Yeah.
have the situational and the default.
Yeah.
I see this here as probably from a practical, can I use this with teachers and students, as probably as one of the simplest ways, although of course you've got there's a lot of detail in here, but in terms of what is it that we would ask a teacher to remember on top of everything else when it comes to interacting with students, and how could we apply it? If one of the things about when you look at in the classroom, it's like your default, to me, I look at that as that's how they're going to establish relationships and then get an idea of how these students are going to process. The situational, many times that's going to, that again, that's that secondary one. I don't know that in a 180-day school year or in a 90-day semester that people need all of those details. I think it's more for folks that are going to guide those people when they run into problems, to be able to fall back and say, okay, you've tried this. Okay, let's discuss a little bit more. Well, then let's look at some of these other areas, as in either your personal areas that you need to develop or things that you may want to do that can help students develop some of their weaker areas, especially when it comes to working with each other. And so that's what I like, because I think this is simpler. I think, I love True Colors. I am a diehard True Colors fan. Green, gold, orange, blue, and essentially it's really the functions, or at least 4 of the functions in order. But invariably, I tell the students to just worry about the first 2. And I think you've done this, and you've actually made it even simpler, because you've got.
I thought a lot about default and situational, just trying to get it like that, sort of like INTP, like trying to get it expressed like both accurately, or at least getting across what I'm trying to convey, and explain it in a small amount of space.
Yeah, in a small enough. Yeah, and again, like I said, anytime I look at a model and it's the pragmatism, you said on the video, I feel so exposed. Like, how can I really use this? How is this going to be something that I can use with students, with teachers, in order to help make things better, to get communication to improve in some way. And in a lot of cases, in order for me to make sure that I check myself as well. And but yeah,
And,
like I said, yeah, this to me this is simpler.
yeah, and I got quite a bit from Vanderhoop because it's like, in a way, you could say that Vanderhoop's book Conscious Orientation is like Psychological Types 2.0
Mm-hmm.
in that. And I said in the video, in the ESFP video, you've got somebody who he wrote a book about a year after
Mm-hmm.
Psychological Types, and I think that was called Character in the Unconscious, and it was just pretty much the same as, and it was like
Yes.
one chapter on psychological types,
I think
and
I
it was
ordered that book thinking it was the one, thinking it was the conscious orientation,
right,
and I got it and I was like, oh, that's not it.
yeah, and it's like, but the point being that he was aware of that model,
Mm-hmm.
like in 1922, and this book is a book that comes out in 1937, and he's a practicing psychiatrist
Mm-hmm.
that's probably been using that model, and he was trained by Jung, and
Right.
he went under therapy by Jung. So it's like he's got the 1921, and he's got like 15 years of experience
Mm-hmm.
as a psychiatrist, going over and modifying Jung's theory,
Mm-hmm.
and then specific. Now the bit though, Jung wrote about a couple of concepts called assimilation and dissimilation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something in learning where assimilation is where you sort of like, you filter what you're learning through what you already know,
Okay.
and you sort of, a little bit like confirmation bias, you pick out what fits your existing knowledge base.
Right. Okay.
But Vanderhoop, what he did to me was dissimilation,
Mm-hmm.
because he changed my paradigm when he wrote about, well, I don't think it's sensation, because when we look at these types, we see that sensation is not the only factor involved in this function, and that you've got the emotional reaction to it. And then that made me think about, yeah, that's right, because we know from Dario, who's basically, his SE definition is essence of artisan,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, and Dario's got his definition of SE. Have I got that in here where it's like, I hope I have it in here. I think it might be gone, but you know the ones where it says like excitement and spur and all the guardian things, that it's not just sensum. There's a real artisan instinct there, and same with the guardian instinct towards protection. You can't deduce protection from subjective sensing. The other functions you can
Mm-hmm.
deduce by
Mm-hmm.
just intersecting the concepts of empirical for extroverting and subjective for introverting. So you can put those two ideas together, thinking and subjective, and you can get a definition of TI.
Yeah.
You can do that with TE and get a definition of TE as empirical thinking and going off evidence and all of that. You can do the same with any, just about, and where you go, okay, patterns between actual things out there, and you can discuss the connections. Whereas if I said to you, Sabrina, go on, prove your NI, and then I've got Jonathan there and Haley there, and it's like, well, I just know it to be true. And it's like, okay, how do I prove this NI thing? I don't even think it's real, this function. It's like, it's so subjective
Yeah.
in that it's like, but like with NE, you can say, oh, these are the connections between this and this, and, or you can put the analogy out there and it's discussable. I think it's hard to discuss NI,
Well,
like the product of NI.
the product of it. Well, divergent and convergent thinking, I think, is probably the closest thing that I can think of in education when we start looking at teaching strategies, and sometimes they'll say learning styles or thinking processes. That's probably the closest that I've seen. And then even just the visual model when someone wants to show divergent and convergent thinking. That and I see and I probably being more on the lines of the convergent thought process.
Yeah, just so the people out there, I'm open to super stickers if you want to send a donation.
Oh, super sticker. I was like,
The super chats and super stickers thing.
super chats. I love it. Love it.
But yeah, a lot of it came up with Model G. I don't know if you've seen any of my Model G videos. Where
I've actually I've seen a couple of them, but I focused probably more recently on the Model V. I think I've told you that's become my Sunday. Okay, let me sit down and see, because like I said, to
well,
me, I feel
more.
it.
You've
Okay,
got one more, but
got
then
one
also
more.
you've got these feedback videos. Like we've at least got Kristen,
Oh, I
and
can't
we've
wait
got
to
Jeff.
Yes, I'll yeah. So
and I think the IN type should be pretty easy to get.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely am looking forward to seeing Kristen. She's fun to work with, and I love the things that she does with students too.
Oh yeah, like, and again, I think she's like a pucker example of a legit example of this is a creative ESTJ preferences person.
Yeah,
but you can also see that she does that within the Guardian temperament.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think one time we were all talking, and then I guess we got on a TE plane. Something that you said, because her and I started going, and you had to kind of reel us in.
Like,
I don't know if you remember.
Like the example that she is the one that applied the social benefit rings theory to teaching.
Yes, to teaching, like that, yeah.
And that's like one of the things with, like, so for example, Model G is like, I had some like scientific training in my degree because I did like apply, and I think Victor Galenko is more philosophical, and socionics is a bit more like the Russian Academy of Sciences has listed socionics as a pseudoscience. That's probably more the information socionics, because that is like really dodgy. Like, so for example, it would have a dichotomy that the ST functions are external and the NF functions are internal. And it's like, but then the way the socionics people talk about it is like, thinking is objective. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, if thinking's objective, that means that when you read Carl Jung, you understand exactly what he meant. Because there's not, and this one socionics person called Jack would say that thinking doesn't need to be reinterpreted. Really? Do you not understand how language works?
That
or
I was about to
linguistics
say,
or semiotics?
yeah. Well, and haven't we learned? I mean, and throw in technology, and throw in literature, throw in so many other things. Yeah, things.
But there's a whole thing out there of, because I've read books on like I read a book on watching Doctor Who and Star Trek, and it's called Science Fiction Audiences, about how different audiences read those two shows differently.
Real, yeah.
And that's about coding and decoding. And to me, it's like, because I'm massive on empirical and subjective, and the fact that you cannot say that thinking is objective, because that is ridiculous, because we know that people can communicate and roughly understand what the other person is saying, but there are misinterpretations, and people do that subjective part. And semiotics with the signifier and the signified, and the fact that okay, if it doesn't need to be reinterpreted, Jack, why do we look in a dictionary to see exactly what a word means?
Exactly.
And different dictionaries have slightly different definitions, and you also get semantic drift. And it's like, there's objective and the subjective, in that there's empirical and the subjective, and also other subjects, linguistics itself. It's like you would have to contradict linguistics, you would have to contradict semiotics, and it is an example in NLP where, I won't get into it, but where somebody talked about doing a job, and somebody else got really upset, and there was a disagreement because there was a certain word that they understood differently, and usually it's when it's an abstract noun. That there was a bit on about competence, and I'll try to find a bit quickly. And I did this as an example of, yes, here it is. and then I'll get back onto the model. But
Okay.
If I go to that one, and here's an example of language, that language does need to be interpreted. So criteria are vague and can be, so criteria are situational specific values. So for instance, your criteria for buying a TV, or like, and criteria are sort of like specific examples. So it's like you might have a general value of aesthetics, and a criterion might be your particular criteria for a particular aesthetics of a particular thing.
Oh, goodness.
So criteria are vague and can be interpreted very differently by other people. I remember a good example from a couple I know well. For her, competence meant that she had actually done some tasks successfully. It was simply descriptive and not a highly valued criterion. For him, competence meant the feeling that he could do a task if he put his mind to it. Feeling competent in this way gave him self-esteem, and it was highly valued. When she called him incompetent, he got very upset until he understood what she actually meant. How different people see the criterion of male and female attractiveness is the force that makes the world go round.
Absolutely. That's excellent point.
And there's an example. Subject, and in beauty, there are empirical standards and subjective values where you probably look, and that you probably had a friend where oh, he's hot, and you're really, are you crazy? Do I have to book an appointment for you?
Right. Yep. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So that theme of the empirical and subjective, and it's in writing theory as well in McKee, the gap between, he would call it the objective realm and the subjective realm. Like in Star Wars, like Luke Skywalker has an idea of how things are going to go. Oh, I'm going to beat Darth Vader. And the audience has an idea. They don't think, oh, he's going to cut his hand off and tell him his dad is his dad. And then offer him a job to kill the Emperor and rule the universe at his side. And it's like, those are gaps between expectation and result, between how you think the universe is and how it is. And the way it's combined with character is the way the character reacts to these gaps in reality, the decisions that they have to make. And it shows you something. Anyway, but getting back to the model, and you're talking about, you were mentioning default and situational.
Yeah, well, like I said, when I think of, again, like I said, when I look at this, for me, my immediate thought process goes to, can I use this? And if so, how can I use this? Is it something that I could turn around and share again with others in order to help them make, become more effective in relationships and cooperating, and also, again, like I said, improving my own instruction when it comes to working with technology. And like I said, what I like about the default and the situational, like I said, I could take this right now and take this in half, and there's so much. You have a whole lot in here, but yet to me, it's so much less than everything else for somebody to have to learn and understand in order to use it.
Yeah, I did, like, because when I wrote it out I went in hipster mode, like ADHD mode. I have ADHD, so you may have noticed.
Oh, just a little, just a little.
So you would say, Ben, I will sign your, like, I think you have ADHD. Like, I will sign that for you.
Or you could be like me and self-medicate with coffee.
Coffee's too much for me. But with this, I lost my train of thought.
We're talking about the model, and you were saying that, I said it's very simple, and that I could actually.
That was it. I was writing it in an exploratory way, in thinking and it was like 13 pages to do. So in writing about default, and so it's like, because when you're on a typewriter, you can't really go back and change it. You can write sort of triple spaced, where you can write a note in between the line in, say, red. So that's sort of useful to write in a triple spaced way. But because, and then I like to do PC afterwards, because then you can really like refine it. But so I wrote a lot of in exploring the ideas and then trying to get the phrasing right. And then by the time I got to this, I was like getting it down and getting it and trying to express it. So the fact that you think it's clear, that's good, because it's like the effort to get it to a point where I've worded it That's why frequently in videos I repeat myself, because I'm trying to find an expression that gets the idea across in a way that I think is understandable enough.
Yeah.
Because I
So
sometimes feel I've not quite explained it properly.
yeah, so different. Yeah, differentiate: dominant, showy auxiliary, fishes, water, backseat driver.
Yes, I worked on getting those names.
Now is
Also,
backseat
trying to get them
driver?
to be colourful as well. Trying to get them to be
Yeah.
colourful.
Dabbling tertiary.
Yeah, that one I changed. I used to have that as like dilettante at one
Oh,
point,
okay.
but then I thought, oh, there's not as many people know what dilettante means, and then I happened across, okay, dabbling, and then there's
Yeah.
those two where I couldn't decide what to put, and then and I used to have
Suggestible.
allergic, but I took allergic out
You
because
used
it
to
was an
say
extra
allergic all
letter.
that. You would say FE allergic. That's what you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like, because I think it's like one extra letter than a verse, and it would sort of make that just a little bit smaller, and I wanted. Oh, and I found this
Okay.
font. I love this font. It's called Alerta, and it was made in Italy for road signs. So for the letters to be as clear as possible. And I do not like L's that look like I's. And so I love Alerta,
Oh,
that it has
right.
the
Yeah.
L and the I different. Because I do not like Arial for that reason.
Well, it looks like
Especially
a little bit.
as a kid, when
Yeah.
I had in a book, and I'm like 12 years old, I never heard of the place Iowa. And I saw Iowa class, and I thought it was lower class.
Oh.
Because of the L and the I.
Yeah, lower class. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Well, and
getting the
like I said,
names for
yeah,
the place.
and again, and I was going to say, and then I like the fact that the order for me personally, this is how whenever I have looked at these and I've wanted to disagree with folks, and I don't really try to get into fights with people in some of those Jungian groups, but this definitely, like I said, for me personally, this is exactly how I see it. I definitely am. I've always felt like, yeah.
Yeah, and
NiTe.
it's like that first cut being like the most important factor being. I mean, I'll bang on about Verton a lot, but it's the third most important factor. Like the data would back up and say that clubs is like the strongest cut. So there's like the first cut in the NT, all the NT functions go in the top four. So that's the most important thing is. But I will always be honest and not forget. Maybe if I was an ENTP, I would suddenly forget Cursor temperament and then go on about the clubs. But then I go, now to be honest, what I am in terms of the most important factor is temperament, then club, then valued, then Verton.
Well, see, and you know what? Like if you look at temperament, then club, then okay. So let's think about temperament. How I interact when I first meet you as a student. If I understand your temperament, that was how we start to get to know each other. Clubs, that is going to guide my instruction. I can use the temperament to pull in some of your interests, to be able to speak to you on a personal level so that we can build a rapport, because there are going to be some kids that are going to need to know that you care, that you know enough about them in order for them to feel comfortable to learn, period. Other students, they just need to know you know your stuff. It just really depends on the student. And other kids, you're going to have to get up there and do a song and dance and motivate them, but temperament can give you some ideas on that. But when it comes to the processing, like I said, the clubs in general, to me, and that's been my personal experience with my own research, but it's also what I have started to see come from others. And then again, going back and looking at historical research.
I can give you the sociologists' names for the clubs, like so you can give an idea where they see it. So they called the NTs like the researchers or the scientists.
Okay.
They called the NS the humanitarians. They called the SFs the socials. And the STs the pragmatists. And that's not far off from what Vanderhoek
No, that's not.
Where he had the technique for ST,
The
ethos for the NFs, and logos for the
The rationals.
NTs.
Yeah.
So that's why I will say to the socionics people, it's like for the abstract types, I think the socionics types are the same as the Kersey types. I've not read a description. So I mean, you've got the Kersey description of INFJ, and and I know Stephen Montgomery worked on that book as well.
Yeah.
And it mentioned at the beginning, like, and so I don't know if he was responsible for putting that paragraph in about the magical powers, and sort of like the INFJ is the most likely of the types to have the extrasensory perception and the foresight and the premonitions of things to come. And I'm like, that is socionics NI. If you're a socionics person and you're trying to pretend that this is a different type, you are just doing that because you are invested in socionics and you want to discredit other systems.
Other
Because
systems.
this
Right.
is what can happen when people do a subject and it tends to happen in socionics where a lot of the schools in socionics where it's like they're trying to pitch their own corner, and they end up having descriptions that are different from the other schools. And it's like there's so many good ideas in socionics. Jonathan uses the metaphor of like he treats and you're not expecting this from an NF, but that's NFJs for you. They've got a bit of a dark side. That he treats socionics like a dead animal and he skins it and he takes the useful parts.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Leaves
Well,
the
like,
rest.
okay, I've got me some boots from this part.
Yeah.
Well, we can let this dry and give this jerky to the dog. No,
so the good ideas that I got from, so I mean, like the idea of the clubs, but then also blended with Vanderhoot. The idea that Victor Galenka had all of these like introverted functions together in one row. That was, and then there's a bit of that came from Dario in some of his research where he wrote that the introvert is pretty good at the introverted functions overall,
right,
and the extrovert's pretty good at the extroverted functions overall. And then the idea from socionics of like the idea of say the backseat driver and it's like the ignoring function. So some ideas from socionics have been taken in, and the problem with socionics that makes it, and why I actually call this now after socionics, it's because it's like a person like after, it's that I'm hesitant to tell people to learn socionics because the way it describes the IS types is inaccurate because it gets all the temperament wrong, and like it's all mixed up and inside out, and you'll have where like Victor Galenka has subtype profiles where all the other types, like say the EN types, the IM types, and the ES types, when you read the subtype profiles, they read like subtypes of the same type. But when you read, say, his LSI profile, which functionally should be TISE or TISX, one of the subtypes reads like an ISTJ, and the dominant subtype reads like Stalin, which would be like ESTJ. But the creative subtype, it has stuff in there like martial arts and working on car parts in the garden, and it's like this is like such cliched ISTP stuff. And where you've got one subtype that's like ISTP, one subtype that's like ISTJ, one subtype that's like ESTJ. And it's only those IS types that have all of this there. And this is not Victor's fault. This is because he's going off the definitions used in socionics. And this is because it doesn't understand temperament. Yeah, because it doesn't like the fact that temperament is asymmetric in its cut. But what I say is that, but interaction styles is also asymmetric, but it cancels it out. So, for example, for the interaction styles, they do ST and SF for the cut where they do for the interaction styles, they've got the STs and the NJs are directive, and the SFs and the NPs are in 4-man. And so you can look at when you look at the temperament, you can say, okay, the cut is NT-NF, and the interaction style is NJ-NP.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's reverse for the concrete types, where on the temperament side, it's SP and SJ, and then on the interaction style, it's ST and SF.
Yeah.
But then when you put them together, it's like those asymmetricalities cancel each other out, and you get to those 16 types. And the fact that it lines up, and frequently in my videos, I'm always banging on about the Kurz's theory of role enactment and how I think it correlates to the functions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so for example, I talk about the inventor role, and I think, oh, that makes sense for like you drawing on TINE and TE, or the clearest one, maybe ESTJ, with the TE and the SI, but then also that SE aggression to enforce the rules.
Do what I say.
And when I did ESTJ, I put Urigitan in there, but I should have put Al Giardello in there as well, because I did a separate video on him as like really ESTJ, and he was based on a real person who played a different person in the show. It was Jerry Diodario was the actual guy, and he played Jasper, the head of the SWAT team, the quick response, the QRT team, the quick response team. Yeah, you were going to say something.
No. Go ahead. No, just go ahead.
So I worked on the idea of contrarian alternative. Yeah, that slot 7. I am aware, and I try to remember to talk about that sometimes with certain people, like for instance in me, I think my FI is stronger than my FE and my SI, but I think that's because of my Enneagram fixation.
Right.
And the 6. A thinker who is a 6 worries a lot and is more in touch with like your 5-wing 6.
Yeah.
So the 5 cuts itself off more from feeling.
Yeah.
Whereas the 6 worries, and then you've got the 4 in there, and the 4 is a very NFE.
Yeah.
Like we've said before, with ISFPs that are 4, like Prince, they get mistaken for NFs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I told you before. I thought, oh yeah, he's an NF. I would argue with people about that because, well, I know Prince. And then when I read his autobiography, that he had started it before he passed away, and his words that he wrote by hand in cursive, and I sat there and I was like, oh wow, yeah, he's definitely an artisan. He was not. There was. The thing about it is so much of what, and I think for me, feelings are abstract. So I looked at everything that he wrote about, and when I think that, because they're abstract for me, as in
non-rational.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by that. And he wrote, and so he wrote about them, and so in my mind, I think that's where in my mind I said, oh, he's an NF, and then like I said, when I reading it, it's like, oh no, and then it's like, no, everything he has is sensory, and then his music, in some cases, he designed the tension and release between his lyrics and the notes. And just so much of that was crafted and composed. And that's when I realized, okay, this is the Prince that we don't know. We see him on stage. This is the one who created all of that.
Sort of, it's like to be like really fair to it is to compare it when, say, how an NF would do it differently, because certain things are like endemic to the role, where it's like there's certain things which are just good craft. So for example, I've read Pat Patterson books. I had a little bit of a segue away from comedy writing for that 2 or 3 years where I looked into songwriting, but I learned some useful stuff about different kinds of rhymes, and it made me more aware of consonant speech. But there's exercises in there about making your language more sensory based. And so if you had, I think like Prince probably was ISFP, but an NF that has learned the process and read the books, like being on like the Berklee College of Music, Pat Patterson. I do think like Pat Patterson is an example of one of those. If Van Hook would have called him the plus variant, like he would have been okay. The person he wouldn't have like, get away from you, you peasant. He probably would have talked. No, that's Kretschmer. Like he would have talked to him. Okay, you're not a peasant. You're an intellectual, because like you've got an ISFP that also studied philosophy and has a PhD, and Pat Patterson is always banging on about prosody. But one thing that didn't have prosody is when he did his lecture and he said stability and instability. And I said, no, Pat, it's stability and instability. You've got to keep it stable for that. But so, for example, if you've got, as you said, tension, say you've got a song where it's the meaning is becoming unstable and moody and emotional, where you want the music to be, you want the rhymes to be non-perfect rhymes, uneven line lengths, uneven line, and so it's prosody in terms of all of the elements are matching each other, and it's like all working together to deliver one message. And then when he gave an example of what he thought was a bad song, and it sounded like a song written by an NFP of someone complaining about tragedy happening in lots of different countries around the world, and he hated that, and he's like, he wants it to stick to one theme, and it's like, oh, he wouldn't like the Pet Shop Boys then. Yeah, because like they go all over the place, and it's like, because if you analyze the lyrics of West End Girls, it's like it doesn't really make that much sense.
Yeah, it is.
It sounds good. NFP.
And it's, I was going to say, yeah, it's an NFP song. Yeah, I agree.
And so I think, but Neil Tennant wrote a brilliant song about lots of dictators and imagining having dinner with dictators. And it's like really good and witty. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant. But the point there is Pat Patterson wanting integration and wanting that prosody, all of the elements working together. But what I'm sort of saying is that you've got, say you got an INFP and they've learned all of that stuff. And then when they get to write, and then you look at them and they go, and they might take it on all, they've done all the, like, I've got a book called Essential Songwriting, where there's loads of exercises in there to write in a sensory bound way.
Gotcha.
And then they might have taken on board all of the lessons of Pat Patterson. But then when you look at them, they might go, oh, they seem to be writing a load of sensory-based language. Oh, it all seems to be integrated. Oh, I think this is an ISFP rather than INFP.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it might just be the craft.
And I would say, and my question would be, but would they be as prolific as Prince? And see, they might probably, they would probably have several. And once they get in the row, but you know, this man has thousands of unreleased songs because he was so prolific with what he did.
Also, probably when I heard Dario, Dario would say that when I asked him to compare the creativity between ISFP and INFP, I think it was like ISFP more musical, more pictorial, and more verbal for INFP. And also, there's probably going to be that difference in subject matter.
Subject matter, right? That
INFP and So, do you think Bob Dylan was ISFP?
I don't know. I don't know, but wasn't a lot of his stuff somewhat political at some point?
Yeah, but Jeff's can be political. I mean, I don't want to out him, but like he's been involved in politics in recent weeks.
Okay.
And he might mention it in the video coming up.
Okay. Well, that's true. That's not to say that they're not, but when I think of someone taking and making creative political stuff, I think of your NFs if they're trying to take. Yeah, that's why I said that. That's a bias. I realize that.
So some of the fiercest people, if they are political, probably ISFP.
Yeah, might very well. Yeah.
Because I remember the story that Hannah said of like the ISFP nurses were the ones that reacted strongest when the instructor said, it was an Islamic instructor, and she said, oh, it's a woman's fault for getting raped. And she said that the ISFP nurses reacted strongly to that.
Wow.
Yeah. Because in Sharia law, I think that if the woman gets raped, it's the woman's fault and it's a disgrace on the woman for being raped.
Mm.
And also, you can't prove the rape unless there's a male witness for it. But anyway, I shouldn't get political. I might get cancelled.
Ooh, yeah, don't, yeah, gosh. Oh, goodness. Right. But
anyway, so that's an example, though. Like, there are certain issues where ISFP, it's like they are going to have like a gut reaction to something. And it's like they've got that SE and they're going to have the force and they're going to show you what they think of it. And it's like that character of Lewis in Homicide: Life on the Street, where Jeff said he thought he was ISFP because he went out on that campaign to like have all of these drug dealers like killed off by other drug leader gang. And it's like because he was crossed and he just like had that FI with that SE where you're sensitive and then you got the SE to do something about it.
Yeah, this is good.
INFP is probably more sensitive to things in general, but they've not really got the oomph to do something about it.
Yeah, more of a.
Yeah.
Oh, when I think of those that I know, yeah, definitely we'll internalize it longer and but not necessarily act on it.
Yeah, the ISFP is a bit, like I said, tougher once they're upset.
No, that's that artisan.
Yeah, so for example, if you had like I remember EJR&D, like he even said, like, if you upset an ISFP, and he gave the example of them being like that cat, where it can bare its claws if you upset the ISFP.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because like I said, they've got the SE. They've got the SE where they could stand up to ESTP. If the ESTP really hits that FI button and triggers ISFP, it's only going to be a few things. But you can, like I said, I gave that example of the nurse as like a thing that would trigger
a trigger, right? Yeah,
ISFP.
Well, and something probably very principled.
And women of all types would be triggered. But it's like I just think ISFP would be an example.
Yeah. Well, being triggered and then actually going and taking what is said as a call to action are two different things.
So
because a trigger doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do anything about it. You can sit and stew and do nothing about it, and you can have a whole thought process behind it.
So it's like you could almost look at like maybe like someone did a study of like the most militant feminists in the 60s and 70s and thought, okay, what were the personality types of the ones that were most active? Of like you've got like maybe got like the theoretical leaders. And like even someone like Germaine Greer, it's like she is hard to type because in certain ways she's a little bit STP-ish and a little bit like she liked Peter Cook and Dudley Moore when they did their sort of foul-mouthed stuff, which was Pete and Dud. No, not Pete and Dud. It was Derek and Clive. If you look that up, Derek and Clive, you might like that. That is foul-mouthed stuff, but it was all on records and released and bootleg stuff before it was released. Derek and Clive, and she once described on a show where she described Dracula 2000, and then she gives this academic sort of criticism, and then it's at the end she just says, "Oh, it's just a load of threadbare bollocks," and then there was a bit where she was on Newsnight and she's talking about Julia Gillard, the then Australian Prime Minister, and she says, "You've got a fat ass, Julia." And it's like, you're talking, and it's like, this is Germaine Greer, who's like this academic who's into Shakespeare. And like, is she talking like this because she's Australian? But not all Australians are like that. I know they're more forthright. And is Germaine Greer, like, what kind of type could she be?
Yeah,
like
that definitely sounds more.
6?
Yeah, that
like,
definitely. Yeah,
she's hard to type.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean,
academic, but she can sometimes sound like Trump.
Well, I was gonna say.
Yeah,
I was gonna say. Yeah, because your rationals, they can play with the words, but that would not necessarily be how they would express that.
Yeah, she's frequently classified as an 8.
Okay.
Like the Enneagram books, like back in the day, because they don't know.
Isn't that ESTP-ish?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird because, like, I personally think that 8s are like ENTJ, ESTJ, and ESTP.
Okay.
But it depends on how you define the 8. So, for example, Naranjo described the 8 was like only an ESTP could be an
Gotcha.
8 because
Okay.
but generally I think it's those 3. But anyway, so the other bits of the model. So yeah, so it's like some of these can move around and it sort of depends on development. So it's like you could have like an INTJ with really strong FI. You could have one with, so for you, so you might, so it's like depending on the job and like, because the job affects development through the job, like drawing on certain functions more than others. So for instance, your FE might be stronger than other INTJs.
I think that when it comes to children, my FE is significantly stronger than it is with adults. That's, that there's just something,
a little bit more patience.
Oh, significantly. I've been told that I'm very patient. Like I hear that over the top, but in my mind, I'm thinking, but they're little.
Yeah.
How can you not be patient with somebody who has not gone through stage of life? That patience is gone with grown folks.
Because you think you should have read this, you should know this, you should be prepared.
Exactly.
Like, you should show prepared for work. Like
exactly. That's me too. That's me too, of course. So yeah, but yeah, I've been very, and I also am very patient with people who, because the nature of what I do, especially when I first started in technology, I never realized how vulnerable technology and learning how to use computers could be for teachers. And these are folks that have been able to do phenomenal things for children, and they get frustrated sometimes because they've got a zillion and one things thrown at them. And it's like, I can't go in there, well, you're a grown person, you should know what to do. You've got to be patient because, like I said, this is one amongst many things that they're expected to do. But in general, no, I don't have patience for people I know should know better. None.
And certain ones of these of like, so the idea, so socialists would call this, it gets translated to suggestive inferior, but really it's suggestible is a better word. Like you're suggestible for SE. SE with FI. Like if it's the Prince kind of,
oh yeah,
SE, like the musician kind of,
yeah.
Like we could put a poll on that. Do the INTJ females like musicians?
Do we like music? And they've got to be, like I'm not into. I don't like the Tommy Lee. I love the ones that just tell you all the I guess probably all the BS that you want to believe. I should.
Because it was I asked. I think it was. I've forgotten her name. It's like she's on the channel. Like I think it's Alexa. It might be Alexa. I'm not sure. She forgives me for messing up her first name. And then a verse binary Achilles heel because there is certain, like for instance, even with Jeff, like there are some times where he's good at finding holes in my reasoning. Like I'll because it's sometimes when I'll put a theory out there just to put it out there, and it's like just a notion that I've come up with, and it's not something I'm attached to, and I don't mind him shooting it down because it's just a possibility. Oh, could it be this? And then he's able to find a hole in that. And so I was like, oh, that's good TI. And so it's like sometimes it can be like all or nothing in that. So it's like that can be so, or it's like the ENTJ or ES or ENFJ that it's like they either completely neglect their bodies or they become a health freak. Or the INFP or the INTP that will overreact. It's either they're completely meek or they overreact because they're reacting with how upset they feel.
Gotcha.
And so there's lack of nuance, lack of appropriate degree with the function in that slot. And so it's like if an INTJ tries to do FE, maybe they really overdo it.
Yep, it's time to. Yep, it's time to have fun. I put it on my other.
It's like you know what I mean. It's that binary aspect of it.
Well, and and I would say that would also be something that people would feel that they're being disingenuous because it is such an effort for them to put it forward. And in their minds they're thinking, but this is, hopefully I'm trying to grow, or well, isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this what's needed at this time?
I remember we were typing somebody she was sure she was like an INFJ5, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought, really? And she admitted to not having any FE.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, an INFJ without any FE is a 5, and then she gave an example of she has to think through what she's going to say before she talks to somebody. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, that sounds more like INTJ, where you got to really plan it through. Because if you're an FJ, you're not going to need to think through and prepare your FE.
No, no.
And it's like with you don't need to do that with your TE, unless
Oh
it's
no,
like something new or like a big
something new.
demonstration you have to do. If it's stuff you know, you don't have to think it through.
I don't have to know. No. And I think it makes people think I'm more assertive than I really am in other areas of my life because I'm able to do that, especially if it's something that I'm talking about that I know.
I get really like that with economics because I know
Uh-huh.
I'm right. Because it's
Oh my
like,
god.
no doubt about it.
Oh gosh, yeah.
No
What?
doubt about it. Because like you cannot have ridiculous amount of debt where it's simple mathematics. I mean,
Yep.
real simple. This is like
Yeah.
junior high school mathematics in that you could do, well, we have this interest rate and that means that we have to pay this. And so you could do it with the government pays this much a year. Maybe it's high school mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like the government pays this much on debt service with the interest rate at this. What would it be if we put the interest rate just to 3%? I know the answer, sir, miss. We're broke.
You know what's
It'd be
funny?
like
There
a
was one.
trillion in
Yeah.
debt service.
Yeah, not for here, but I definitely want to talk to you about Bitcoin. I was watching your point
Oh,
where
it's
you're talking
terrible.
about when
If
you were
no,
talking about the INTJs and a lot of times they can make accurate forecasts, but if they're starting with bad information, it's bad
yeah,
information in, bad information out,
yeah,
and makes me
go on.
think of John Nash in A Beautiful Mind,
Yeah,
where he was
yeah, go
so
on.
sure, and he's so sure that it's like
Oh, I can give an example of.
mhm.
Now I'm going to demystify your NI, or rather the NI of a lot of NTJs in business. So,
Okay.
Kersey has NTJs as, maybe I can put that graphic on screen about
Okay.
coordinating resources. I think I got it somewhere. Oh, I've not got it, but I'll just say it now. So you've got the NTJs who are naturally good at coordinating resources towards long-term objective. But in business, you need to be able to borrow the right amount of money for the project.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what you've got, the Austrian business cycle theory people will say is, you have the price signals that when you've got an economic bubble, these price signals are going to screw people up, and it's even going to screw up the NTJs. And so so for example, when you have artificially low interest rates, people consume more, and because they're borrowing the money to consume, and especially if the interest rate is less than inflation, they're going to borrow it and spend it now. And so the NTJ entrepreneur is looking at that and going, oh, there's demand for that product, but that demand is debt fueled. And by the time, say in 5 more years, when there's more debt and people aren't able to have that same level of consumption in that area because it's debt-based consumption.
Gotcha.
So the price signal is wrong. And also, when interest rates are low, the NTJs, it allows them to think about those projects that take so it's where the J curve is a little bit elongated before it. I've got to do it the right way before it like pays off on the J curve, because it's like, well, if you've got low interest rates, you think, oh, I'm going to borrow this money and I'll break even in 10 years. But if interest rates were higher, then it's like low interest rates give the fuel for these projects that take longer to pay off in the future.
Got you.
And also that demand might not be there because it was a false signal, because it was
In the
based
first place. Got
on
you.
debt. And so all of these signals screw up the NTJs, and you get these malinvestments because it's not. Whereas if you have real interest rates, this is why you shouldn't have a central bank. Interest rates should be set by the market, because what you have is, if you've got savings in banks, that represents people that have earned money and have spent less than they've earned. But in terms of resources, what that means is these people, and if you're valuing their contribution to society based on money, you can say that the value, what they've put into society in goods and services, and then the amount that they consume. And so, and then the bank balance with the amount of money they've got in the bank, you can say this group of people that have saved have put more in than they've taken out. And the savings represent the underconsumption. And then that's balanced by that other half of the population, whatever percentage it is, say the investor class, that then borrows more money. And so it's like they take more out of the economy in the short term than they've put in. But it's like that balances out those that have underconsumed. And those that are borrowing, and especially if they're taking those resources out to allocate them into an area that is investment that leads to production, and then that increased productivity will pay for the loan, and everybody gets better, because it's like you have the customers get a better service, you get the people who are employed, you even get, and it's like, and Peter Schiff talks about, if someone's rich and a billionaire and they never spend any money, well, that money is in the bank and it's being lent out and it's being used by the community. And so he says you should only tax people when they spend it on themselves. With the consumption tax, you want to tax consumption, you don't want to tax savings. And also that within, so it's like there's a balancing out. But when you have the Federal Reserve creating money, when you have artificially low interest rates, it changes the types of loans made, in that people tend to make, when you have high interest rates, you're less likely to spend the money just to consume, because you've got to pay back a high interest rate. But a business person is thinking, oh, but I'm going to make the money back in profit and I'll be able to pay back the loan. And so actually what happens with low interest rates, you get fewer loans and you get more loans for people refining and a housing bubble and more consumption of stuff. And it tends to be, and because there's not the business investment, it tends to be consumption of stuff made abroad that puts up the trade deficit, and people borrowing to consume. And so low interest rates, in low interest rate environment, people act stupid, even NTJs.
I was like, but it made, like I said, it made a lot of sense when you said, but you're making all of these projections, which,
and it's all about resources ultimately.
But it's based on false data, and I was like, ugh.
Because you've got to do a lot of that planning.
Well, what's funny is I have our new 401k rep is the first, he's an INTJ, and I know this because when we were talking, I remember thinking, I was like, every other person that we've had before has been ISTJ, but there was definitely something with this young man that I thought, so got to talking about temperament, and he knew his because he had been through several workshops before, and it was funny because I thought, I said, I need to send him this video and say, no, look, you got to keep this stuff in mind. Because, your guardians tend to be so much more conservative in general. They're not nearly the risk takers, but that's
especially
a whole other
SI
Oh, absolutely.
So with this, what do you think of the name of the columns?
I think they're cool. The one thing that I do have a question about is the driver, the backseat driver. Is that too close to personality hacker? Because they call theirs the car model.
Yeah, but did they actually call any of their positions backseat driver?
I don't know, but I need to, let me look that up. I was trying to remember right offhand.
Because I got that from ignoring. Because Socionics calls that position ignoring. And well, also they only have 4 slots in their car model.
Yeah, they don't. They call it driver, co-pilot, 3-year-old, 10-year-old. Never mind. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I find that offensive.
I was just checking when you said backseat driver. But you know what? The only reason it drew my attention was because car.
Yeah. But I like their model because no one's going to take it literally.
Right.
Whereas a lot of these models are taken literally.
Yeah.
Oh yes, another somehow to like, I want to say introverting and extroverting rather than introverted and extroverted.
Right.
Because it sounds
Because
like
it's
something
really
that's happened.
but it's a process is
Yeah.
what you're doing. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
process versus just a state of being.
Yeah. And you can dynamically change it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes more sense because you know that there've definitely been so many people have tried to explain to you, okay, well, it's not so much you're an introvert versus an extrovert, but because those were the first terms that people have come into contact with, that's what they'll label themselves as. I remember Karen, the woman that I was working with years ago, whenever we would have our big like back to school meetings, she would catch me going off into the corner and slowly getting out into the hallway and then watching from a distance, and she'd say, "Stop introverting." And I was like, I'm doing what? She said, "You're introverted. You get out here. You get out here. We haven't seen each other." But I was like, but she was the first person I heard use that term, and I thought, actually, that's exactly what it is. It's an action. It's not. We shouldn't consider it a state of being.
Yeah, make it more, channel my inner Kersey and make it more acceptable to him. It's like, it's an action, it's a psychological action. And also Jung wrote something about the attitudes. And so by attitudes, he meant thinking, feeling. I call it sensory instincting and intuiting. And Dario came up with intuiting because Jung called it intuition. And he said something like, and again, there's certain parts of his book where he's very careful and then he gets sloppier because it just takes too long to be like super pedantic all the while. And he says something like, insofar as such an attitude is habitual, and he put habitual in italics for emphasis, insofar as such an attitude is habitual, thus lending a certain stamp to the character of the individual, I speak of a psychological type. So that's like looking at it from the outside, in that if someone has the stamp of habitually doing this, then I'm going to label them as a type.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than saying someone is a type.
Yeah.
That's why I will use preferences or say someone is a resembler.
A resembler. Yeah. Yeah. That's why a little person commented last night. I resemble that.
Yeah.
I don't know what he wrote the video, but the other thing too, going back to it, is that again, like I said, I like the way that you've got it written up here. It's not on the screen now, but
I can put it on.
Okay. I was just going to pull the default versus situational as being the primary way. Okay, default first. Yep. Introverting. So by default, this is what I do with these functions here. I tend to, by default, introvert. Yeah. Makes sense.
And then it's
then the other thing that I think is so true about that is that the situational, once I know and I feel confident, once I'm ready to go, boom, I will go to those first. That right in that right in that order, versus I definitely would not. Yeah, it's definitely not FE.
Yeah, another way of doing it would be to sort of like ask people about the ordering. If I was to ask you to order your introverting functions, would you put them in that order? Would you rank them like NI, then TI, then FI, then SI?
I would say that.
Or would it be different for you?
For me personally, I think on the top row, going where you have the 1, 3, 5, 7, I would say that there are times at work in particular that my SI and my FI might change. So that would actually be more situational for me because of the fact that I tend to work a solitary a lot more now, especially when it comes to working with a longitudinal data system and getting things prepped and uploaded onto the back end, and then drawing on creating reports. So I think my job has somewhat forced me. Whereas when I first got into this position and as a classroom teacher, it was that's accurate. But yeah, my role has changed somewhat over the years. I've never considered myself to be a detailed person, and I have put in safeguards to help me make
Right.
sure that I address those things like routines. I mean, I have notes and whether okay, how did I do this the way that they liked it the last time? No, 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 no. Let me pull that out, note to self, and go back and do it because it's not intrinsic, so to speak, but
Yeah.
I'm required to do it. So I would say that those two would change, but definitely at home, that's the right order.
Yeah. Also, I think sometimes, so I am open to, because of development, just because of someone's role enactment, someone's job, that
Mm-hmm.
some of these can move around, but
Oh,
generally you get these are the top two, and that one pretty much always last.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
the eighth.
yeah. Well, and like I said, anytime whenever I've read descriptions, even when I go in and I look at, if they have TI in a list and TE in a list, there have been so many times where if someone has wanted to break them down, I'll go do do do. Okay, I've got about 4 here and
Yeah,
6
but,
here, so definitely more TE, but there's a good bit of TI over here too that really applies.
yeah. I'm just going to put this for the people who maybe not seen this bit
Hmm.
about where Dario wrote about. Yeah, it's those, and also there was a difference in Model G about. There was a theoretical difference I had that made me move away from Model G, where it had a particular slot um, quite weak. So, for example, if we do this for all of them,
Hmm.
I don't know how visible that is.
I can see it fine because I have it blown up on the screen, but if
Yeah.
it's on a mobile device, it would be difficult.
Okay, if we could do it for Quadra, say most people watching this are NTs. So if we put all the NTs on screen, where SI is weakest in ENTJ in that they're trying to work themselves into the ground, trying to become like the next captain of industry. Um, ENTP is rock solid, terrible at FI, no doubt about it. INTP, cowardly cuthberts or whatever you want to say, like not getting much done, like with the really weak SE. INTJ, definitely terrible at FE, usually. Not showing much expression, or it's like all or nothing, or when they smile, it's like gone. There are trends. Tends to be more in males, I think. The FE really
Hmm.
weak. The FE Achilles heel. So that's a useful lesson from socionics about
Hmm.
that, what they used to call the vulnerable function, or the polar function, as in place of least resistance.
Hmm.
Um, but I forgot why I brought this up.
We were talking about being able to change around the order and some things being
Yeah, in certain
situational.
people because
Hmm.
of development. So, and also, and so in Enneagram, in your case, you're 5.6. That six wing makes you
Hmm.
more cautious, and
Yeah.
so that overlaps with SI.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm definitely, there's a lot of,
It also
and
gives self-pres as well.
so, oh, very self-preservation. I would like to think that I was social, but every single time that I've taken it, the questions have always come out self-preservation.
Yeah,
My
social's
friends.
not look with FE averse, FE allergic.
Yeah.
That's you're not
Yeah.
really going to get a social INTJ. That's by definition.
Yeah. But and I think what happens is that as if I think as if that when it's people within my group, that it's just completely different. It's just
Yeah,
more of
yeah.
the day to day.
I think Ben Shapiro's INTJ because he did the MBTI and they talked about him, and he's
Hmm.
got that INTJ ISTJ voice. Like he's got a certain kind of voice where it's
Yeah.
like FE polar voice.
Yeah, sometimes he comes. Sometimes, it is. Yeah, he's definitely a little smart aleck. There's no getting around about it. No, I think he's also. People think that he's an ENTP, but I think the longer you listen, you go, no, he doesn't have that. ENTPs typically have a certain charisma about them.
Yeah, yeah. and they
That
putting their foot in it every now and again, like Boris Johnson, like Peter Schiff does it.
yeah.
Like, you don't do jokes, Peter, finding the logic holes in false rape allegations. It just gives off the wrong image,
That
and
is
that's what he
probably,
did.
yeah, that's probably not a good thing to do. Yeah, there's just some things that some things do need, like I get annoyed at the whole concept of cancel culture being about every little itty bitty thing. Drives me nuts. But um
Because it was about all the stuff about like either Gersich or the other one, Brett Kavanaugh, and the
mhm,
accusations made against him, and he
yeah.
would go through like the stories, and he says like making jokes about the pain, and it's like he's finding humor in an
Yeah.
inappropriate
Yeah,
situation,
let's not, yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
proved right. But like Peter, it's like fi sense
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah, well, and part of it is you got to realize that there are going to be people who genuinely have gone through these things
yeah,
in their lives. They're going to immediately empathize or connect with people. They don't want to think that someone would lie, especially if you've been through something like that. You would not think that somebody would lie about it.
oh yeah. So
So, yeah. So
that's
just
what he would be like that on his radio show when he would also talk about social issues,
mhm.
and it's like he would also have some, yes, he had but he also funny as well, like ENTP, because they're willing to risk it in order to get the laughs, but they don't know
Yeah.
where the boundaries are. Where it
Oh, here
says,
goes
it
that.
said something like Elon Musk may have gone in, no, something like, who owns Amazon? Bezos. Yes, Jeff Bezos may have gone into space in a penis-shaped rocket, but it's us who are going to get, but it's the American public who are going to get the real shaft.
Oh,
Something like
wow.
that. So he has these funny lines, and he's like Peter Schiff is ENTP, like, and like he has these digressions,
Mhm.
and he talked about, there was one point when he had a digression, and he talked about Superman, and he
Mhm.
digressed into comics changing something politically correct about Superman and going and getting changed, and he's saying that he couldn't get changed in a cool box anymore because they don't have cool boxes, and he said that, but he digressed onto that because he went on about people do a lot of stupid things. In the 50s, people used to try and cram a load of bodies into a coal box to see
Right.
how many you could get in there.
Uh-huh.
Like the boot, like, and it's like, and then he digresses, and it's like, okay, Fish, you are an ENTP.
Yeah.
So I listen to a lot of Peter Schiff.
That's funny. And it's so funny when you
Yeah.
said that. I had to think. I was like, when was the last time that I saw a phone booth?
Yeah.
Like that's been like I cannot, because
But
like, do they even exist? I guess, are they at airports? Like I'm trying to think.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, in
so,
England, like you may have even had the red
oh yeah. Oh,
ones in
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
West
that's what I was gonna
Indies.
say. It's been forever.
The red
I
ones,
think
like that they
because,
had in England,
yeah.
like the proper
Yep.
door.
Absolutely. I can, and I, oh goodness, yeah, I can remember kids getting in trouble for locking themselves or getting
But in terms of role in
students.
that, man, Peter Schiff
Mhm.
is enacting the ENTJ role in the businesses he runs. But and so it's like he's doing an ENTJ job, but the way he talks is like in an ENTP way.
ATP
So
way,
if you were to look at Peter Schiff's TE, you got to say his TE is wicked strong.
Yep.
TE because of his job, and he used to be more TI, and he goes more towards the data, but he always puts his subjective spin on it, where he'll do his brilliant analysis, where it's like, okay, that's just really good reasoning, and then he does his speculative stuff. And
Gotcha.
that's,
Sort
I've
of
got
on
some
top of that.
videos on my channel where I've
Mhm.
put, is this TI, TE, or just damn good reasoning?
Joe
That's
Damon.
what I've got them on it.
But see, that kind of goes back to the fact that for certain, for that NT type, that they might vacillate between those introverted and extroverted thinking, and
Yep.
yeah, and that right there, like I said, when I see it, I see it as part of my job. I see it as just part of my daily routine. That those are the things that I tend to go back and forth with, and then I might have to switch into those other
Yeah, and
functions.
especially as a female, like having to go more into those traditionally female
Mhm,
roles, or say
mhm,
mother, and you have to,
mhm.
where the female entities have to do more of the role, or generally do more of the roles that pull on their feeling functions
yeah,
than the
absolutely.
male
Yeah.
NT.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, when I look at, like I said, at being a mom, being a grandmother, that's that it wasn't anything I had to, okay, let me think about. Now I will say that when I had my daughter, I was worried she would know I had no clue as to what I was doing, and I had every How to Raise Your Kid book possible that I was reading because I wanted to make sure that I did everything right. And like what to expect when you're expecting, what to expect here, what to expect there, because whereas I think my mother probably never thought twice about any of that.
Yeah.
But she's an SFJ.
So I'm going to go on a lot when I do the next week, when on next Saturday I'll do ESTP. I am going to do a lot on FI Polar, and I've got a lot of stuff there on Logan Paul
Okay.
and some of the stuff he's
Be able to
done.
share. Oh, that'd be
Like
good.
he was a smart guy. Like the way, like that's the thing with the STPs, the way they act. You think, are you sure he's smart? But like he was going to do engineering at university, Logan Paul. So, but it's just the way they act.
Yeah.
ESTPs. It's like,
Well, and remember that one of those tests that I took, engineering, the ESTP students did fine on those things. But
yeah.
but again, it takes more than simply being able to answer that question in order to make it a career. There's so many other elements that come into play.
So, what are your other thoughts, or the things? What else have you written down about Model Mine?
Model mine. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Here we've got.
And again, folks, I've not tried to be wacky with the model. I've tried to be accurate. It's almost a conservative kind of model in the way it's arranged. It's just the bit that I think is a bit that's not talked about enough is me banging on about default and situational for the Vertem.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the I think like from here would be adding in application to personal life, to education, to career. In that,
Well, if you want to write those chapters in the book,
there you go. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that to me is the part, because like I said, that's any resource that I get, those are the three things that I look at. How do I develop as a person? Yeah. How does this help me in school? And then how does this help me in the workplace? Because although those of us that have a preference for introverting, we actually have to get out into the world. And the sooner we have these types of tools available to us, the better, because at least it gives us something to start with to help understand, one, that we're not alone, two, we can learn how to communicate our needs to others a lot better, a lot more effectively.
Yeah, I'm just going to add something to the folder where I put default and situational.
Mm-hmm.
I think in some ways the explanation, because the explanation of the default and situation is different depending on whether it's an extroverting profile or an introverting profile. And so in some ways I've added a bit more. So for instance, this is comparing default introverting. This is default extroverting.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you maybe any comments you see on there, because this is where I've added a little bit more to it. Because they are different. The two templates. Because you may have seen a lot of the introverting ones.
And that's what I looked at the most. Yeah. Yeah. TE. Now, is this the same? Now, is this INTJ here that you just blown up?
No. This is for.
Oh, I was going to say, because I saw some things. I was like, that does not. Okay, extroverted. Okay, which one?
Yeah, because I had to create two templates. Because I realized that I'm going to create two templates.
Gotcha. Let's see what this is. Oh, okay. I do see artisan.
And also, I also thought that not enough people were talking about Jung's idea of, and I really wanted to bang home. It's like I bang home about the idea in Kersey about the difference between type and role. And I really bang on and really like ring the bell and go on, or whatever. I'm not sure that's the right expression, but in terms of like reiterate the point again and again that what Jung meant by objective was empirical, and he definitely stated subjective for introverting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that when he gets to his quote, when he talks about extrovert and he says the object, it's not really the object, Carl, it's the stimulus, because you could be in awe of music. A sound can hold your attention, and that's not an object.
Mm-hmm.
It's the stimulus.
Do you think some of that came because of the language translations and then English people reading
Maybe
a translation of a translation?
because there's certain sections from where Laura Hutton has translated. So she translated Vanderhoop, and Vanderhoop was quoting Jung, and because she translated it, the slightly different translations of Jung, because I compared those sections in Psychological Types. It was translated by Hull, and then I don't know that like American, like, because it was like H.G. Baines, like, did they like do it again so they could have the copyright that like slightly tweak the translation? Because H.G. Baines did the proper translation, and then it says RFC Hull, and he only slightly paraphrases the translation. So I think that's maybe to get a later copyright, but
Later copy,
a little
this
bit,
is completely different.
yeah, a little bit dodgy.
Yeah.
And like, so for instance, here when he talks about the object, well, it like some people take that literally, object as in
Thing
like
a something mass.
Yeah, like an actual like physical
Yeah.
object, but like it could be
It's a
sound.
matter.
It could be the wind in your face.
Subjective interest.
I mean, technically, those are little tiny objects of gas, but
Okay, yeah, or sound would be sound wave. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
making the vibration. Yeah. Should I think of active extrovert will and when a passive extrovert when the object compels it.
That's a useful idea from Jung. And I think that on average, that the introvert is going to be doing more passive extroverting, because it's like, leave me alone, I want to read, because they're getting disturbed. So passive, like being compelled against that, whereas for the extrovert, it really is that active extroverting. Oh yeah, then I talked in the videos about ISFP and ISTP, where I think I talked about, and it was something new I came up in the video, where it's like, okay, this idea of them going in the wilderness, like going on that long car journey, being alone, but in the great outdoors, to think, oh, I'm going to go on a hike. Why are you fishing? Why are you hiking? To think. So it's like they're extroverting, but whilst getting all this sensory stimulation. And I think that's true of like ISFP and ISTP.
I was going to say that's I mean, the goodness gracious, to me that's like cleansing the palate. It allows them to be able, it's like
go on a hike and have a think, go fishing
and have a think. Have a think. Yep. To me, it's all like putting that brain on idle, and then they can process it when they're all ready to.
So sort of like, so in this one more than the other one, I've given examples of different kinds of extroverting. And I think it works. And this is always to show that if you do it in terms of empirical, it makes sense. So you meant empirical, because it's like I've taken that interpretation. I actually think Jung meant empirical, and I agree with empirical, because when you tease it all out and deduct it, you get to these results, and these results aren't a reductio ad absurdum. They make sense, like with the FE, where it's expressive, or it's the social norms that are actually there. Yeah, look, how do you know this is what you should do? Well, here's the book. And then they literally have these books of manners.
Yeah.
And they were talking about it in Seinfeld, where it's like, this, what is the done thing, and all of this sort of thing.
There was a Mrs. They called her Mrs. Manners, but there was a lady that used to.
Oh yeah, and the sitcom came out of the stage play genre that was the comedy of manners.
Yeah. So, Yeah, that's a sensibilities, I guess you could say. The folks that feel the need to follow those conventions.
Yeah, and also another way of thinking about it is INTJs and ISTJs, well, especially INTJs, usually bad at all of those things, like the social. But ISTJ though, and again, I always put that wrinkle in because they're
Mm-hmm.
a guardian.
Mm-hmm.
They're more want to belong to the community,
Yeah.
whereas
Well, I guess
INTJ not so much.
it's like stupid. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why? I don't get it. It's a waste of time. Yeah. Yeah. I used to frustrate my mom sometimes with comments that I would ask her. So, well, why do we have to do this? This doesn't make any sense. And she would look at me like, how could you even question? I had a friend in high school who had a book on etiquette, and she was planning her wedding long before she had a boyfriend. Like
Wow.
that was the kind of thing that was like, who does that?
STJ,
But
SJs, yeah.
yeah, SJs. But she was very sweet. And she was a debutante and all of that. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that mess.
Oh yes, that's something that Carol Linden talks about.
Mm-hmm.
Again, and I get this term from Kersey about the social field. You've
Mm-hmm.
got Carol Linden as an ENFP, but she grew up in the South. She grew up in
Mm-hmm.
Alabama, and like very FE valuing.
Yes. Yes.
And so all NFs who grow up in the South are going to do some
Some
FE.
of that. Yeah. Yeah, I've enjoyed watching her videos because she definitely knows how to
Yeah, the language of the function she's very good at.
yeah, oh absolutely. Well, and two, she has a great way of thanking people for their contribution and rephrasing things, reframing things and letting people know that she has been there, she's listening. I mean, it just really really good. I can see why she's good at what she does.
Right. So, like I said, in order to like squeeze in that full quote, and
Mhm.
also my additions, because the actual thing is a little bit like I had to like clean it up a
Mhm.
bit to like make it clearer, because he did have a lot of stuff about libido and unwilling to restore interest to it, and so
Mhm.
trying to make it clearer for people about what he actually meant by this, because libido is not the same thing as interest, but interest is heavily correlated with libido, and it's an
Mhm.
easier way to understand it. And so I couldn't then there was no point then putting this big chunk in there again when this is for the
Mhm.
extrovert, this is for
Mhm.
default extroverting, and this is for default introverting. But because that's smaller, I could put a bit more detail in there
Mhm.
about extroverting. And then when we get on to the next one, because you've seen all this stuff before
Mhm.
about, and then I just go, I'm gonna get rid of that bit. Oh yes, you can see there that I put it there, that bit, and then to get more room there on the top one, and then in the
Mhm.
second one, there it's smaller, and then I've got more here about the situational extroverting in no, sorry, the situational introverting in the extrovert. Yeah, and so in some ways, I like the
Mhm.
explanation I've done for the extrovert more than the
Mhm.
introvert.
As I'm looking at this, there is a some years ago I took a disc-like test that had a that gave you two results, and it wasn't um default and situational. It was specifically for I think it might have been work home, something along that line. But anyway, I'm looking at that and I think, you know what, I could actually see how results of, if you were to develop a an inventory, not an inventory, how you could have something that shows their results and then would show the order of the second set, the counter club.
There's
I'm
a
just
way of
having
doing
a
it like Dario's is like he's got like maybe you could communicate with him on this, because like he might like you to have a look, because he had Mina Barame do a data analysis.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you could contact him on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and you could ask him for his data, and then you could do a different kind of analysis
Oh,
on it, because he's got like 127,000 or 27,000 of. He's got a lot, because it mentions how many there are in the back of the book. Because he's
so
on
he
LinkedIn,
lets
you could
people
ask
look
him.
and he lets people analyze their data set.
No. I'm
data...
saying like he might let you do it, because you
okay.
can say
no. Well,
you've got the credentials where you can say, hey, I would like, can I look at your data and see if it's useful?
Yeah.
In education.
In education,
and he worked in education himself at university.
Well, I was going to say, and I still have my stat wizard that I used when I did my degree. I think I've said it before, SPSS, Excel, and then Max Statistics Wizard. And I did it in all three because I knew that I would be able to have Excel after the fact and Max Statistics Wizard, because SPSS is like crazy expensive. And so that way I knew, one, that I really knew the process, because to me, I don't know it if I can't replicate it in another system. It means it's, if it can only be done one way, knowing that these other programs are capable of doing the same things, that's my rationale for that. So yeah, I could go in it, because one of the nice things after you have done it, after, when it's no longer a thesis, is in data science, there are a couple of approaches, because you're not trying to put out a hypothesis and then go in looking objectively, and then finding out whether or not you can actually go in and play around with the different applications. What are the ways that I can analyze this categorical data? How can I analyze this numerical data? How can I analyze this ordinal data? And go in and play around and just check and see what results you get. And one of the cool things about that is you might find correlations you didn't even begin to think to look for.
So maybe what you could do in your pitch to Dario is like, Dario, these are my results. Because I don't know if have you done, it's at keystocondition.com, and it scores, and it gives you a score for each of the functions.
At keys to condition, you said? What's it say?
No, I'll put it on screen.
Okay.
And basically, he created the website to promote the book. I sometimes call him Dario Business Logic Nardi. He always creates a free website to promote the book. Like, he created the website bestfittype.com with the temperament and interaction style to promote the book, The 16 Personality Types.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
well,
so
that's a trend in business, because you do that. And if you create a test, you get their email address, you send them a PDF, you've got their email address to continue the relationship. Keys to cognition. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Yeah. And if you go there, then maybe you could
explore. Let's see. Let me go and see if it's still there. Keys to cognition.
And then you could say, like, like INTJ to INTJ, you could like say, hey, with these results, maybe we could try this, and just give one example of the, like, if I could look at your data, Dario, then I could like look at it, like give an example of him, and think, oh, this person knows what she's doing. Like, she could help with a fresh set of eyes on this data from someone who knows statistics and from an education point of view.
Yeah, well, like I said, there's a lot of times you'll find correlations that you don't expect to exist. That is, and I can tell you this much: that is how it is a lot more difficult to find statistically significant correlations with a 4-letter type mathematically. It's not impossible. When you do find them, they're not nearly as strong as if you have 2 of the 4. So that's, and those strongest ones are your function pairs or your club pairs in general. Now but now mind you, there have been times, depending on what you're looking for, it might be NJ, whatever, it might be the result of N and J, that you put together, or I and T or whatever. But the strongest ones typically are those function pairs.
So, if you have, what else is on your list, Sabrina?
Well, I was going to say that but I think that's kind of it. I did make a few comments on, and that was just more of my sort of going in and understanding. You have taken and looked at what Jung has done, and then have definitely done a nice job of fleshing out what he meant. And I got a little bit of a chuckle when you said, from Kant, my fanboys love.
Yeah, I think so. I think so with Jung. I think that was the case.
Yeah, I thought that was fun. Well, you're adding a little bit of the humor there too yourself, aren't you?
Yeah, that's the point. Yes.
Yeah, I said he's really channeling Vanderhoop here, right? Or was it Krebster?
Yeah, like sometimes you do take the opportunity to, like, one time I went a bit far and I had an ENTP moment when I did the INFP profile. And it was about, in Victor's profile, it said something like, doesn't like loud compliments. And then I wrote something about, wolf whistles being finable in France. And then I wrote something about, INFP females can now feel safe to go outside. And it's like, it was a little bit of an FI polar statement. Are you saying, Ben, that other women aren't offended by wolf whistles? I was like, okay, I'll change that gag.
Oh, good. Yeah. Wolf whistle.
Loud compliment. That's what I thought they meant by loud compliments. So this bit, what about this bit with energy and information? What I'll do is I can make it make it a bit easier to read. I'll let you take that in for a minute.
Okay.
Because I get the impression that a lot of people get a bit silent when I go on about this. So I get the impression that they're not getting what I mean.
And so this would be, so that's an extreme.
So, for example, Victor's model would have NE as your weakest function. But that wasn't my interpretation of his model. My interpretation of his model was high information but low energy, with the key point being that because you have higher information, and I then correlate high information to high competence, that because you have higher competence, it makes the task easier, and thus the task requires less energy of you. So even though you have less energy for the task, it's not that demanding for you because you have high information
it's
for the
efficient.
task. Yeah, and I think maybe some people don't quite understand what I'm saying there.
Efficiency. Yeah.
That yes, it's about efficiency. Yeah,
it's about efficiency.
Effort required versus effort needed for the task.
But again, I would also go and say that sometimes we have to consider how long or how did we get there. Sometimes there's so much energy initially in the initial stages in learning something, in mastering something, in exploring something, and then one day, I don't know if it's 10,000 hours, but one day it's just extremely.
It does become easier.
It does, but it becomes
easier.
With
me with the comedy writer. You end up, like, initially you do a lot of stuff that it's a lot of crafting and thinking about it and making notes, and then where you just sort of get into a mode and write it in the. But what helps me is if you get a funny point of view, like if you do like the ESTJ Nigerian mother, like in just like I was inspired by Gina Yeshure's character when she said that it's like that. She said there were 4 options for a mother in terms of job: engineer, doctor, lawyer, disgrace to the family.
Disgrace to the family. Yeah, you shared that one of the things. Yep.
Yeah. This like, and I thought, but that character, I thought, wow, that character is so ASTJ, and I was like, I see Nigerian culture. Because I know people will say, black culture is more artisan. And when I heard that, I thought, no, necessarily.
Right,
not necessarily. Some African cultures are very guardian.
Yeah. Well, and I think what happens is that it depends on where people get too quick to define black.
Yeah.
It's like, you've got to remember that there's ethnic groups and you also the country will impact it'll impact how you see things.
Yeah, like there's
And so
difference in
yeah,
culture in the West Indies, say between Jamaica and Barbados.
absolutely, between the West Indies, and then you also will see differences in the United States between the North and the South.
Yeah,
Just like Carol Linden said, if SJ values are what is valued. I mean, I look at my grandparents; they were definitely very S. Well, I think that my grandfather was a he did auto body work, but he was such a sweet, gentle soul. I would almost think he was a composer, but he probably was a crafter. And my grandmother was definitely a guardian. And so, definitely. So that's why I say, yeah, there's definitely yeah, like I said, you got to look at location, and you've also got to look at socioeconomic status. And if certain behaviors are believed to be the reason that you have a certain socioeconomic status, that's that mother that says the engineer, the doctor, the disgrace to the family,
yeah,
that all of that plays into that.
yeah.
I think
And
artisan artisan is what helps people survive and get going. But in terms of establishing culture and maintaining culture, that's that guardian's role.
also, I think that would be a good character for an actress, like an older actress in
Hmm.
England to play that character. But like,
Hmm.
I'd probably have her come in season 3, Constance
Hmm.
Olufemi, and she named all the children, like, because they tend to have those old-fashioned first
Oh,
names in
absolutely,
Nigeria.
absolutely. Yes, old-fashioned first
Ernest,
name, and then they
Constance, Gertrude.
yes, and they keep their African last name, but
Yep.
definitely, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
That's
and
a
apparently Olufemi means God loves me. Well, you're a little bit
oh, I
confident
love that.
there.
That's beautiful. Beautiful, LFME.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so I thought with the names where it's Tamsi or officially Tamra, then I put
Hmm.
Brunella Olufemi because she loves Isambard Kingdom Brunel, and
Oh,
she
okay.
called her son Isambard Kingdom Olufemi. And then
Wow.
and then she named her daughter Tilly Tilly Schilling Olufemi because of the British engineer. If you look at a picture of Tilly Schilling and she's there on a motorbike,
Uh-huh.
and it's like she is like ISTP like racing motorbikes and being an engineer. Tilly, I'll try and show
Oh,
people
wow.
that picture.
Look at
And
her.
somebody once said
She looks
best
like Amelia
Facebook,
Earhart almost too.
yeah, best Facebook picture ever. Someone once said for Tilly
Wow.
Schilling.
Oh, she don't play. Look at that. Yeah, I
Yeah, I'll
would
just
mess with her.
try and show people that on. Oh, he's got a place. No, we've got to put engineer. Hey, they got a little bit cheeky about. You know what they called her engineering achievement on the Spitfire engine?
Mm-mm.
They only called it Tilly's orifice. Yeah, you look Google it. Right. Yeah, I'll show people this image.
Wow.
I'm just
Yeah, you type
alter
in
the shape.
"oh" after the search. That's what comes up. That's funny.
Yeah, I'll just move it on the other screen. So if people want to see probable ISTP
Cardi
female,
B STEM girls. Go ahead on, girl.
share screen.
1909 to 1990.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Like, can we make it bigger? I'll try and save it and then I'll show it.
Uh-huh.
I'll put it in the ISTP folder, even though it doesn't fit. And then I'll go back. I'll put it in the INTJ folder. Where's Tilly? And then I'll put her on. And she's like sitting in I think artisan for her. And just like the way she's sitting on this bike. There we go.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah,
Something,
so she came up with a valve on this because the Spitfire engine, when it would dive and go into negative G, it would cut out the float carburetor. So she made a little adjustment to sort of stop that from happening. No.
Oh, it's bad stuff. Yeah.
Anyway, so called her Tilly, and so Isambard Kingdom Olafemi for the son. So she loves engineers.
That's
Constance
awesome.
Olafemi. And I had this speech of her where she's complaining about the British not being like Victorians, and she wants them to be like Victorians when they did things.
Wow.
Well, what I should do is I should put a line in where Townsend says, "What you mean, like conquer Africa? Don't be rude."
Well, that definitely would was it I want to say that look here. I'm having an any moment here. Let me see.
I'll get back to the graphic. Right, I can ask you about this NI thing and see if it rings true, because I did this today while I did it in the middle of, because I was writing about, I'm being like extra methodical with the Laura character, ridiculously methodical, and just like really taking pains. Like I might even be like 100 pages on Laura.
Yeah. Well, spot on.
Which bit?
Inarticulate insights into personal, collective, unconscious.
Yeah. It's like, I had the impression it's like, you're just going to have to believe us, Ben, that we have this wonderful NI that we can't tell you about.
You know what? It is harder on younger people who do not have a portfolio or do not have history in an organization to deal with that, because
they can think they're mad.
Yeah, I remember when I was back years ago when I first started in this particular position, I was asked to go help with a project at the school board, and they wanted me to tell them my idea, my vision. Now, I could see it, but I couldn't articulate it. I knew that if I was left alone, that I could come up with something to show them. But the need to do that ahead of time when they've just given me the information to process, and it was a video production thing. Anyway, real long story short, I remember asking my immediate supervisor, please, in the future, if you could give me something ahead of time to give me an idea of what it is that they want. I said, it's a lot easier for me to just go do it and say, as a prototype, whether it be a storyboard, whether it be a video, whether it be a PowerPoint slide, whatever. And then I can show them and they would be like, oh, okay, because if something has to change, I'm fine with it. But it took so much longer. And I remember someone making a comment like, oh my God, that was painful. And it was painful because I couldn't articulate it. But I knew that I could do it. And how, when you're new in a position, can you say, oh, just trust me? Now, 20 some years later, I can say, well, here's a sample, here's a sample, here's a sample of things that I've done. Yeah. And then give me what you want and I'll be fine. And so that it takes years to build a reputation. And if you move from place to place, it's one of those things that I tell younger people that have NI preferences, or at least if I get to know that that's what they have, that it's important for them to keep a digital portfolio, even if it is pictures of things that you've done, samples of your work. In the perfect world, you'll make some sort of little website for it. But the reason is because sometimes it's hard to show people that you know how to get the job done, especially if they want to see that vision. And I was terrible at brainstorming initially, unless I've got the experience behind it. If I got the experience for it, it doesn't bother me at all. But other than that, I just need to, like I said, I always think of it as like that tornado just kind of coming in, starting up at the top with that wind of stuff that I've got to pull down. So yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, especially the inarticulate.
I think the best way I could make a case of NI being a real process is when I can say we can only really see the effects of it when it's like, so there's another idea I talk about when I talk about Kersey is that the Kersey system of different intellects is, it correlates. Oh, thank you, Retro. Gave me a £5 super
sticker.
Oh, I like how the fact he's got his hand up. Yes,
That's
£5
awesome.
in the
Nice.
That's
awesome.
In the picture. That it does correlate. So, for example, you've got Kersey's roles of physically providing for people's needs, and really going off that word of benevolence, being actively kind on a physical level. And then when we look at it in terms of functions, that matches up with, if we look at our definitions of FE and SI, that sort of matches up with those two functions working together. And then if we sort of look at FE with NI, and it's like, with the mentoring, what you're actually doing with mentoring, you're guiding somebody, you're guiding a class, or you're guiding an individual. So there's that developing part of NI. So I'd like it, Sabrina, if you saw that video, that eventually when I get it on my channel,
okay,
because we're going to do it in about 2 or 3 parts where we're really digging down deep on NI.
Well, what you mentioned about the benevolence and the helping. One of the things that I think about, that I feel that I contribute.
Oh yes, I'll just say the NFJs are helping psychologically.
Right.
SFJs physically.
And I would say that the NTJ, well, I see myself as helping in when something has happened, what can I do to help them prevent this from ever happening again?
Yeah.
And also sometimes being willing to speak up about something before it happens, in spite of the fact that it may not be popular. If you see, because for me, if I see, now you have to do certain things, you have to do diplomatically. But if you see that something is going to cause somebody a problem down the road and say nothing, to me, that is just as negligent. It's negligent. You shouldn't do that. Now, the problem sometimes might be that if you're dealing with somebody that's sensitive about whatever it is that they want to do, then that may not be, it may not be an easy conversation. But it's nice if people can, it's nice when you can work in an environment where you're able to say and to share things that are not always positive, because I think that, and it's not tough love as much as it is, you just have to be
thinking about the results.
You're thinking about well, and again, like I said, now that the dust has settled, what can we do to see that this never happens again? Like I said, I find myself constantly thinking like that in crisis.
And the idea that Kristen has used, and this is an example of, so she uses the idea of socionic of the social benefit realm, and there's a particular relationship called the superego relationship. And when I looked at those, and then I looked at it in terms of the Kersey, I then superimposed the Kersey roles onto those rings, and I saw a complementarity. I hope that's a word. I'm using it. A complementarity between the roles. So, for example, INTJ and ISFJ have opposite valued functions. So ESFJ would be the direct opposite of INTJ, and ISFJ is like the next opposite. But if you compare the roles, the contingency planner that's seeing how things can go wrong and avoiding those mistakes, and then you've got the protector that then sees to the situation after it's gone wrong. Then you put those two roles together, and it's like this complementarity there.
Absolutely. Because right now, in the here and now, we've got to take care of these people. They don't want to hear well, you should have done it this way, and in the future do it that way. We need to get them and make them whole first, and
Yeah.
then from there we can take that long-term vision that you feel that you have, and we can put it into play.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go a bit away from Model V, because I think this is important in terms of the social.
Okay. Oh, I definitely want to get. Yeah, I'm looking at. Definitely got a couple more on there though. That.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that, because it's just one graphic I did where I have it, and where I did a diagram of just looking at the roles
Mhm.
of. Oh, is there something there? I did that sort of it, I believe. No, that's a little bit like that. No. Is it seconds here? Because I did when I superimposed the roles of.
Oh, is that the one that has the little things down at the bottom, the little blocks from the Kersey or personology?
I found it. I just gotta put it across. So yeah, it was just overlaying. So that's it. This, and it works for the extroverts. So here,
Oh, okay.
and so this would be so this one. This is a benefit ring. No, not this one. This one. So these are called the right spinning extroverts. And when you overlay the predisposed roles, now I changed one because really ENTPs are all good debaters. Only a few of them are good inventors.
Gotcha.
So if we say that the ENTP is the natural debater, now think of the education context where the teacher also has to supervise and explain and debate and perform. There's complementarity between those roles, where the supervisor has a, you stupid idiot, you don't do it like that. Let me show you how you do it. So you can see there's complementarity between the roles. And I thought, that's interesting. And Kristen applied this idea, and this is the idea that she applied, well, without sort of knowing about the roles, but she took the socionics idea and applied it in the education context. And it gets a little bit less strong with the introverts because socionics has a problem with the sensory introverts. But again, with the arranger and the protector, right, trying to stop things from going wrong versus it's gone wrong. Now what do we do?
Right.
And then you sort of got like the inspector, sort of going a little bit there, like arranging. You're looking for things going wrong, and then
in the middle of the process,
a little bit of complementarity.
Yeah, well, and they would be the person that is overseeing as things are operating, or at least even if it's from the sidelines, and being able to point out, okay, we're going to probably need to do such and such pretty soon. Okay, looks like this may be a problem here. Boom, and then mobilize those troops. Yeah.
And then with like say ESFJ and the ENTJ, that's in the same benefit ring where you've got, say, the ESFJ would be a good wedding planner.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like there's also an idea of like say, and this is like I think I'm gonna call it a super ego shift, where it's like ESFJ is a good small scale mobilizer. And then also you can say, well, there's certain times when ENTJs will act a little bit ESFJ-ish in the now I know you can sort of like, oh, Ben, you can come up with these for all of them, but they don't quite work for all of them. But like when ENTJ, it's like, especially if there are three and they're trying to do the social contact thing and the social networking. And so you could say, okay, I can sort of see a complementarity, not between the types, but between the roles of supplier. supplier of resources and coordinator of resources.
Exactly. They've got to communicate. They have to be able to
And
work together.
Then here's a weird one: promoter of schemes and advocator of causes.
Well, there you go. Because
For
promoting
ENFP and ESTP.
Oh yeah. Well, that advocator is going to add that passion, and they're going to add the ethos. They're going to add the emotional component that is going to be necessary. Well, I was going to say the ethical component, because you have logos, ethos, and pathos. So it might be pathos as well that they would be able to add to that.
And there's something extra as well. I think is that the bit at the bottom. Oh, and that is Vanderhoek wrote about when the ENFP goes a little bit psycho, and it reads like them turning into an ESTP. I'll just try and get that slide from Vanderhoek, because you see moments like that where they have a little shift there. Not all of them, but just little every now and then. Because they're an NF, but if they're a 7, they want to have fun as well.
Yep.
Right, I've got to get the right model. Right. I actually cut that out of the explanation because I thought the ENFPs might get offended. So I'll try and get the full one. Rings model, ENFP. That's the ENFP second, isn't it? Right, so it's that one. Right, so I'm gonna, and again, it's like that idea of those roles coming together, where this is ENFP, and then it's like in model G is a more complex model and less in sort of like, I don't use the word counterintuitive, I use the word like counter rational or something. Where it's like, it goes to this. Oh, this would be my model. Is that my model? Yeah. Ben, you should remember your own model. Yeah, that's my model.
Yeah, because you got the two.
Model G. Yeah. And then, I'm just going to, have I got the other one? I just want to prove that this is ENFP in the same way. There's a little bit over here. Link. And where's the other one? Okay, I'll just do it like that. And it actually, in Vanderhoop's ENFP, it sounds like the advocator role.
Okay.
If you look, like presentation of ideals and plans in a vivid manner. You can read it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, and of ideals, meaning that it doesn't exist. This is how it should be, which definitely says future orientation. Oh, let's see the charm. Okay. Mediator, champion, the advocate, and mediator.
And then the next bit is
powerful influence. Yep. That's that advocating a powerful influence. They get in there. Oh, that's F. Yeah, FENIN. FE.
Oh no, it's not just FE in.
FE in. FE.
And FIN, yeah. Not maybe I should have done that lower. I tend to write in block capital when I
I was looking at it,
do notes.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Consistent with FE as the strongest second function. World is possibilities.
And then it's like, then it doesn't do it with INT, but then he goes how they go psycho. A little bit. He's got the whole book. He's got the
counter nucleus in the field of consciousness.
Yeah. So I just thought a little bit much. I'll change that to counter club.
Counter nucleus.
I had counter nucleus on there.
Yeah.
And then we get all of this stuff. And this to me sounds like when they have a little bit of a shift to ESTP.
Yeah.
with this stuff here. I'll let you take that in.
Okay. Cold calculating. Well, see, yeah, I could see that one up at the top there. They had it there. Cold calculating opportunism. Really forget such experience. It's disturbed, and then you come to terms with this other side of the personality.
If I was to be cheeky, I might say this is when the SJW projects a little bit too much and the nasty side comes out.
Oh, yeah. This does not fit with the habitual view of the world. It's something that general rule is depreciated and in sharp contrast to the prevailing ideals of the person concerned. Of that person concerned. Okay. Yeah.
So there's something there about the benefit ring. And sort of like Kristen has sort of proved the utility of that idea. But when you base a model around it, I think that's just a little bit more on ENFP. When you base a model around it, you end up with a complex model that you have to sort of like have all these workarounds to like, and you have to do a lot of extra explaining. And one of the reasons with my model is I wanted to try and make it a little bit easier for people to understand. And I had a few issues. It's almost like Model G was like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, in like it had a lot of pluses to it, but some minuses. Because the way the functions were arranged was a little bit odd, and yet, but there were reasons for it. But it's like that expression when you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it was easy to see, to comprehend, it'd be like that. But
so you see here with like the Model G of ENFP, you got NI all the way over here, and then it's like you have to say, well, it's not really that weak. It's just that weak in terms of energy, but really it's strong in terms of information. And then it's like, well, why is SE over here and TE there? Isn't that stronger than that? And then you can sort of say, well, it's used as a launcher. And you have these like specific examples. And it's like, oh, and they only use this when they're on their territory. And it's like, well, what about if the situation demands that they be used? And so it's very, and also it's quite precise and constrained in that these are your social mission functions. These are your social adaptation functions. These are your personal functions. So it's like, it's sort of saying like, it goes against the idea of say, well, I mean, that actually fits for advocator role, but it's like really using all three. Using it because it's like you're expressing it, you're being expressive because you're an EF, but you've got those strong ideals and like FI related stuff, and it's like those three working together. You can sometimes put on a Kersey diagram. But getting back to INTJ, let's see if there are any other
any
other comments.
Art and
with
a
our
guiding
3-hour video.
Oh gosh, right? Oh goodness. So prediction. Let's see, predicting hunches, developing, changing. That's true. Yeah, I think we've kind of addressed that a few times because I agree 1,000% that we aha insights and solutions.
Oh yeah, we'll go back to that. Yeah,
what's funny, I think about that now. My son ENTP, he has a lot of these, and he's always had that as a child. But I could also remember, well, I mean, it's still like that. I think that I'll go back to, I think that we take in information constantly. We just don't process it in the forefront. It's not in the moment for us. It's almost like, okay, I'll put that here, I'll put that here, I'll put that here, I'll put that here. And then things that need to come together, to me, it's almost like a camera lens that you're focusing. We see bokeh lights, lens flares in the distance, and then we slowly focus in on it. And that's, I think, what's in my mind, what's going on in the back. And then at one point, it's like something's come into focus, boom, and it feels like.
There is a theme there with the AZNI DOMs seem to be more visual.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? My mother used to say, if you want Sabrina to shut up, tie her hands behind her back. Because sometimes I see things in my, and sometimes it's not like a vivid image as much as it's in this position, and I know that it's in this position. Yeah, but
And then
yeah,
and then I had that
very
bit
visual.
recently that I didn't like insight being pegged on one function. And I do think that each function can have its own insights.
Mm-hmm.
But then
I
I
think,
got that idea from Vanderhoop of like, well, and Kersey would say as well, well, these functions are not completely separate.
mm-hmm,
You've got to blend in together different things. And it's like,
mm-hmm.
well, maybe it's like, but you have an insight, but it's like it pops into the realm of thinking.
And yeah, well, as you say, yeah, it comes into focus.
Oh, and also, George Binney Dibley wrote a book called Instinct and Intuition, and he has some quotes from the French, and he talks about two ideas of, and he said the only difference between instinct in English and German is the fact that it's got a K in it rather than the C. But when he talks about the French talking about intuition, he said they had intuition, and they had something called intuition réfléchie, which is like re-intuition, and they had the idea that you have an intuition, think about it, and then based on what you thought about, have another intuition about it. And I thought, oh, that's an extra bit there. You've had a re-intuition based on your thinking of your previous intuition. So I call that, what do I call that? I called it something re-intuition.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like what I call backwards hindsight, or hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. When and this is kind of when in Bermuda, a lot of people people believe that there was a thing called the Bermuda Triangle, and that the island was
It may have
haunted.
been gases coming up and
right. That's what I was.
things up. There was
That's
some
what I
other
was going to
science
say.
involved.
Oh yeah, That's exactly what I was going to say. Was that when you look at the history of the ships that passed by and heard all of the, and they said, well, it looks like it's uninhabited. What happened? Things that were never taken into consideration. Ships had crashed against the rocks. The animals swam to shore. People who did come to shore left other animals in the event that they came back there, they would have something to eat. The way that the island is at the top of a volcanic atoll, it's located on the southern part of the volcano and not on the northern part, but those ridges were causing the thing. So basically and then you also had gases that were impacting the people that were on board boats. People were losing. So there was a whole lot of things that we've now found, and the scientific explanations for a lot of the things that have happened. And it doesn't have that mystery or mystique anymore, in that people that, it's not anything you really hear people talking about. My father, who's an air traffic controller, said if you take any triangular space on the globe, you would have an equal number of vessels underneath and planes that have crashed, because the geographical area that they call the triangle was actually quite large. And there were a lot of things that caused that. Now, I see that much like intuition. I am sure that, between folks like Dario Nardi that are looking at was it EEGs?
Yeah.
And others that are trying to find a more scientific explanation, it's going to be a lot less exciting or mystical. Like I said, I personally see it as, we take in things, we don't have the time or the luxury to process them. When we have some downtime or lull time, we realize that they've been processing all this time, and then they come to the to the forefront when we need it. Mom, talk about mother's intuition. Mothers who recognize patterns, little things like our daily routine. We don't sit and think about it until there are 3 or 4 things about a certain routine that have changed. Then all of a sudden we have that aha moment. I see that as like I said, a large part of it, and that some people, that way of functioning is more innate than it is in others. That we can help people try to develop some of those. We may develop some of those things later in life, but for many of us, those are our dominant functions.
Yeah. One of the things I'm always trying to sort of look against intuitive bias. trying to describe like everything that's creative or imaginative. There's a tendency for people to put that in intuition.
It's
and
not.
and type everyone who's creative as an intuitive.
No. And I think, when you look at gifted education, flexibility, fluency, elaboration, and originality are all forms of creativity. And I would be willing to bet that if you started thinking about just the verbiage alone, it would be easy to say which one's probably correlated. Who would be the most flexible? Flexible, in terms of how many different ways you could look at something. Fluency, who would be the most thorough? Elaboration, the more detail, and originality, of course, the most original idea. There are a couple of tests that they've done along that line that might involve, okay, here's a pen. How many different things can you do with this pen? And they would measure those answers by those things: flexibility, fluency, elaboration, originality. And I would be, like I said, I'd be willing to bet those correlate toward temperaments. And not everybody that is your NTs may not come up with the most. Well, your NEs would probably come up with a lot of ideas because that's their preference. But the person that's looking or values originality, they'll have one original thing, and then you'll have somebody who's significantly more flexible that'll have 1,000.
Maybe, yeah. And
you know what I mean?
That will correlate to NP as well with the. But one of the things I think because of their temperament, a lot of guardians. So, for instance, in Kristen's case, she had parents or has parents where I think one of them's the SFP, one of them's INTJ, and they're sort of encouraging her to more think for herself. And so I'm wondering that for temperament reasons, there might be a lot of creative guardians out there. And even if it's a small fraction, there's so many guardians that they might not be expressing their creativity because their temperament is holding them back. And certainly as a career, they're not going to go down that road.
I would say that where I see guardian creativity in the classroom is that many times they might have the most beautifully put together, make the classroom feel like home type classrooms, and will look and think of the creature comforts that kids need, versus, oh my gosh, look at that cool design, look at that picture, look at the little toys. It's I don't know, a different feel, and it feels creative. It feels loved. Your guardian teachers, those are the folks that will pull in I see this with artisans too, but they'll pull in a sofa and they'll have pictures. It's really
that comfort sensing coming in.
Very comforting.
Get the sofa there.
The sofa, the pillow.
So it's like there's a tier, like. So do they literally have it where the top of the class, you get to sit in the comfy chair today? Do they have that?
Yeah. Or sometimes, there'll be absolutely. It's a badge of honor. Yeah. And sometimes you'll have it because and you'll see it more in early childhood. But part of that comes from the belief that, especially when they're younger, you want to create a sense of family in the classroom. And then at younger ages, they're still allowed to move a little bit more. And when it comes time for story time, what's more fun and more intimate than sitting around in your family room and having story time, or sitting in your desk in a row? Now, you take the guardian teacher 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, you might see more traditional instruction. But at the younger levels, like I said, they will take and do some of the neatest things. I think what I'm going to do, because I can think of a couple of teachers right offhand that I'm going to ask them if I can send you some pictures of their classroom, just so that you could see what I'm talking about.
In terms of creativity and guardians, I think David Marquez once said that out of the guardians, ESFJ is the closest to the artisan.
Yep.
And it might be that with them and the FE,
That's it. Yeah.
But part of it is like entertaining people.
Yes.
And so there's a
Yes.
way for ESFJ to use that NE.
Mm-hmm.
And,
And
and Kristen is using it for teaching, for a practical application. So there might be a lot of STJs out there that have not really got an outlet for their NE. Or it might be shown in subtle ways. And I remember it was Hannah gave me the example of from an ISTJ brother of just the way ISTJ might use TI, not to create something wacky and new and original, but to improve the authorized system.
right. With it's funny because ESFJ is the #1 type in elementary education.
Oh yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah, it's almost unfair to even try to play guess, make that a guessing game, because that is like the #1 type. So it's funny that you should say that, but like I said, their classrooms are typically beautiful.
And also they can look a bit like when you get a creative sort of subtype of ESFJ, they can look a bit ENFP-ish.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But what they choose to show their creativity is centered around making that classroom a home.
Yeah.
It's not a reflection of me, the creative. It's this is for us to enjoy together. And all of those details, like I said, yeah. And because sometimes I walk in a classroom and I'm like, can I be in your class? That's how I feel. Yeah.
Well, they must be a good ESFJ because usually, they're
Yeah,
like
well,
kryptonite
now
to
mind you,
INTJs.
yeah, well, I'm just talking about as a little kid, I'm for that moment, I
Yeah.
just enjoy the scenery. You get someone like me, like, I don't know if you can see these in the back. Do you see those
I'll just
little, can you
change
see?
your. I'll just
Yeah.
click on your square in a moment. Oh, there we go. I'll click on
Okay.
your square. There we go.
Okay, do you see those in the back?
Yeah.
Do you know who
Oh
those
yeah,
are?
you got Grogu.
That's Grogu. Grogu's my boy. But if you look there, I do the true colors. Green, gold,
Right.
orange, blue are the true colors.
But
And
I'm not changing my system because I'm used to, like,
don't. Yeah.
I have my colors like green is idealist,
Uh-huh.
purple is NT, orange is artisan, and blue is guardian.
Guardian. Okay, so Guardian is gold,
Yeah,
Artisan is orange, the
right. So that's the
blue
same.
is blue's idealist, and green is the rational. I found those at the grocery store and they match. The gold has a tie, the green has glasses. And you know what those are? Those are peeps. So my joke is, hey y'all, I'd like to introduce you to my true colors peeps.
Yeah,
See,
but
it's a
I would,
corny yeah, those are
oh
peeps,
right,
the little Easter peeps.
right.
See, that's my idea of, oh, look at me, I'm being creative. You go into a guardian's classroom and it's like they have little bowls of peeps for you to eat. They have a place for you to put your paper, your paper towel, wipe your hands before
Yeah, a
you
place for
go.
everything and everything
A
in its place.
place
It
for
makes sense.
everything. Whereas me, I'm like, look, isn't this funny? Get it, peeps? You're my peeps. They're true colors. Oh, yeah. That's the difference.
I've also that you get with guardians is they can have that little bit of NE in them, and it's like Kersey nailed it when he wrote about the associative speech of guardians, and it's like changing subject from hopping from subject to subject. I thought that's guardian NE, but it's on a concrete plane. It's tangenting on a concrete plane.
Yep.
It's
Well,
like
and
weird. Oh, I got a red jumper, and I remember when I was a child and I knocked my knee, and then I had some soup afterwards, and then my grandfather, and it's like this train of NE, but
it's still like you said, very very concrete, and it's still tied to that's very specific thing, and usually they're a little bit better at getting back to.
Jeff is because Jeff, like me, is interested in comedy, and so if you do the temperament show with him, you could maybe have one of like the different temperaments in comedy. Because he reckons Jay Leno is guardian, and he has some other ideas for comedians, and he thinks, and I agree with him, that Dennis Miller might be irrational and
Irrational. Yeah, I was going
ENTJ
to say.
because
Oh,
he has these elaborate jokes and references.
he was on SNL years ago, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Yeah.
thinks Dana Carvey might be an example of like an artisan. And he also argued a bit with a lot of the Kersey people would type Robin Williams as ESFP, but he did a lot of NE. But part of me is like saying, okay, I want to, but he might just be, what if all of his motivations are artisan, but he did a lot of NE? If all of his motivations were artisan and he did a lot of NE, but what I would say is, well, his motivations are artisan, he just developed his NE, and that's natural ability. So I would go with temperament first. So I would want to know, were his beliefs and all of that idealist? Maybe because like I think I've got extra FI and I shouldn't have extra FI. Well, maybe you could have an ESFP with extra NE, because I want to look at the motivation, because I think the motivation is less likely to change because of someone's job, whereas I think functions can be developed.
Functions will change, right? That's exactly because you got to get
like the NTs that work as a counsellor get better at feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and yeah, and I think too sometimes too the NTs that work as a counselor, one of their benefit, one of the benefits that they have is that they're a little, I think, can be a little bit better at not showing what they feel about something, that can allow a person to get everything that they need to get out and not necessarily feel judged. But what do you think Trevor Noah would be?
Who?
Trevor Noah. Are you familiar with Trevor
I
Noah?
literally don't know. Is he
he
might be a black comedian, that's all I know.
Yes, okay. I will
literally that's all I know.
I'm going to send you a video in particular that I think you would find amusing, but I would be curious as to what you would think he would be.
I also have a little bit of like counter bias in me, where like I don't want to say every flipping comedian's an Eddie Dom.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, because yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. Well, to a certain extent, it's that ability to take one thing and then pew 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 pew. Very any.
Like, I do have things like, and it's like that slot, that seventh slot. Because when I did the Model G, I was always banging on about how strong that role function could be. So, for example, development, like FE DOMs can be wicked good at TE because they have to be, or it's because, say, ESFJ in a work environment, and it's like they will do TE for FE reasons because they want to fit in, and it's the work, like it's like the ethics of the company, maybe, like, I mean, most, and it's like, just because it's a TE atmosphere and for FE reasons, they will go into TE mode. So I think ESFJs can have wicked strong TE, and it says, and that would make sense for logistics, that kind of TE. And so I also think that like FI might be a little bit more stubborn about going towards TI, but you also have those like INFPs that study philosophy, and it's like, well, it's highly likely they've developed their TI because of the requirements of philosophy. But then what you got to do is ask what kind of philosophy they studied, and then you can sort of get an idea of like, like especially when it's like INTP and INFP, like, are they going more towards the humanities part and the ethics, or are they sticking purely with the logic? And it's like, there might be a little bit more INTP-ish there, because it's like not going towards greater truths and reality and purpose and all of this sort of stuff. And in type diagnosis, a big factor is upbringing, as well as Enneagram and upbringing, because just like there was an INFJ once, she grew up poor, and so the socionics typing of her was INFP, because they said, oh, she's TE valuing because she cares about money. No, it's because she cares about money because she grew up poor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's living in and tourist culture. I've said that to you before. I'm sure you know there's a customer service is valued. You live on a 21
Effie.
square mile, so yeah, it was 21 square mile island. And what's funny is growing up, like I kind of did. I was always in my own little world. I look back and I say, God, I must have looked like a little weirdo. And I can remember smile, and I would be thinking to myself, but I'm thinking, I don't. What
Yeah.
am I supposed
Oh,
to
I would
do?
have that as well. Even in my early 20s, it's like, well, why aren't you smiling? And I'll say, well, I've got this large amount of flesh here, and so it's difficult.
Well, well, the thing about it is now I know how to make small talk about little things. I mean, that I don't necessarily feel like doing, but I recognize that it's a survival skill. So you definitely, we were encouraged and brought up to be that to be polite to
I'm,
tourists, to be polite to people in general, um, and
I'm
to
still,
who's to.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
still
and the
self-indulgent, and I tend to turn the subject to something I'm interested in.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about it is, yeah, I'm definitely there with you. I mean, I can do that in a heartbeat. But I also, like I said, realized years ago that I'm going to have a few operational go-tos for small talk. It's not the effort today that it was when I was younger, but it was definitely something. Yeah. What'd you
There we
say?
go, one for you. I think he's using bead
Anything?
model, maybe.
Okay, Puella Eternus between them.
Yeah, he talks in a particular way, does Alex?
Okay, let's
He
see.
does. Like he is living proof that thinking does need to be interpreted. Like,
Uh,
because what he means and how we interpret it can be
mhm.
slightly different. You have to decode him.
Okay, well, to Puella Eternus, that's going through that's the child, right? The forever child.
Yeah, because you know Latin. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The internal, the forever child, the critic.
yeah. She went to grammar school, Alex.
Yeah, between represents the nature of the spirit and the source of the spirit.
Oh, is that like critical parent? Ti? Is that what they
Yeah,
call? Is that what
yeah.
they? What
The
is that?
critical.
The third slot?
Yeah,
Or
between
in model Beeb, it would
represents the
be
nature of the spirit and the source of
slot
spiritual
6, wouldn't
glory.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, forever child. So yeah, and let's see how you've got those here. Look at that.
Yeah, it's different for mine. I think he's using, but yeah, if
Yeah.
you, yeah, I don't like model Beeb, and I distrust him when he said Jung only wrote one sentence. We said Jung wrote one line on the auxiliary function, and I'm like, you ENTP, you can't just come out and say stuff like that. I mean, everyone who, and so just to be sort of pointed about it, I say, okay, it's 27 lines, and if you want to count it as one line, it's 3 meters long. So, and also when he talked about when he explained the archetypes in his model, it
Hmm.
didn't ring true for me. I did not have an NI reaction to it. Like sometimes with Greek mythology, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, this is a little bit weird. I can feel there's something to this. It's like it's like this has archetypal power. And I sometimes get that with, say, H.R. Giger's artwork. It's like, oh, there's something to this.
Hmm.
It's like I can feel an archetypal power here. The way he described his bead model, it's like it's not got the archetypal power for me. So I think, like, I'm prepared to say it, ENTP charlatan. And also, Carol said, when I asked Carol, has John Beebe written a description of each function in each position? And then she said, oh no, I've never seen that. That would be too much work. What he does at a conference is he gets people to discuss amongst themselves. And I'm like, why is he not prepared to do that? Like, to put it out on the line, to prepare, because I think your theory should be falsifiable, that it can stand up to some kind of test. Write down how FI is used in every one of your slots. Why not do that?
Gotcha.
I mean, you've had all the decades to do it. Yes, I use TINX to describe myself. Yeah, even though, and also for all the time, and Dario agrees with that as well. That third function can be strong, but even with it, have you finished processing this stuff, Sabrina? Because I've got
Yeah, well, I
website.
was just trying to think. Well, I was going to say, because what he's doing is he's referring to how that model works with those in that particular order is what I'm gathering, right?
Yeah, and I part of it is competition, but I have a I've got an inbuilt bias against the NTPs. It's like, unless you're Peter Schiff, I'm not trusting NTPs.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, and the other thing going along with that is that many times people will use, you could still have your favorite model and work within that model, but then cross over language wise and use the verbiage or the terms from another model that you know is more universal to other people.
It's like way Jung describes like his theory of how the archetypes work in the image. It's like, oh, there's something to this. But when Beebe described the way the archetypes work for his model, it's like he's doing that ENTP thing that Alshra did, where she took those, like Alshra took those Freudian concepts and then called and said like ego row, super ego row. And I get the same impression that what Beebe has done with his model. It's like an INTP would have gone through it and worked out all of the archetypes properly. But then again, I'm also lazy and can't be bothered to go through his book and analyze it all. And it's like, if you have to pay me if you want me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
I
I was
don't
going
want
to
to
say,
get distracted by stuff like that.
right. Well, and I would say too, to a certain extent, when I look at that, I think BB's, if we're talking about the same thing with BB's model, I look at that. I think I mentioned Eric Erickson earlier, the psychosocial crisis, trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, the intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, ego, integrity versus despair. I tend to tie those functions more to Eric Erickson's psychosocial crises than I do to anything else.
Right. So
because I see those as the stages in which we develop those things in that order. If you can do, if you don't mind, if you could pull up an Eric Erickson and it's Eric with the K. Erickson with the K.
I'll make this the last thing. My
Okay,
FE is getting a
stages
bit
of
smaller.
psychosocial crises.
Right. So Eric Erickson.
Psychosocial crisis, and if you do the stage, there's a couple of charts that you could probably pull up. Let's say approximate age, psychosocial crisis.
Is he the one that was born in 1975?
No.
Eric Erickson disambiguation. Is it Eric with a K?
Eric with a K, Erikson. And there's a couple of there's a colorful chart that you could probably pull up. That's what I've got to the side. Yeah,
born in 1902.
That would be him.
Born Eric Salmonson or Solomonson.
Is that right?
Well, I'll show you a picture.
Eric Hamburger Erickson.
Hamburger.
H-O-M.
Died in Massachusetts.
Yes, it looks like he died in Massachusetts. Yeah.
I've got to stop share screen, share, because it's a different window. Yeah, so we'll have to probably close on this one.
Okay. That's him. If you could find the picture of his psychosocial crises.
All I've got is these. I don't know.
Can you do an image search?
Yep. Right, so what do you want to...
Eric Erickson, psychosocial development. Because I didn't want to dismiss.
Oh, right, yeah.
I didn't want to dismiss what he said because I just look at things through a different lens. Okay, like that first one that's very
Oh, this isn't
colorful.
like flipping. You know when he does those, like, there's a theory out there that I think's like liberal bias. It's like there's like the Graves model, or
I don't think
I don't
so.
like that. Where the top level is when you have become a liberal. That's like
No.
there's one like that, and
Oh,
it's
I
like
hope not. I was going
yeah,
to
and
say
it's
that's
like
not.
and it's like if Enneagram became like hierarchy, I thought I don't like that. That's not fair to
No.
different types.
This isn't really a hierarchy. This is not like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is just where the stages that we
Maslow's
go
hierarchy of NF needs, I
of
call it.
NFTs, right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. If you could click, let's see if you can click on one of those.
Is
Just
it
to give you
like
an
it doesn't
these are just
quite go
stages.
that big in? Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So
I'll try and make that bigger.
essentially, when I pull all of these together as a teacher in early, my undergrad is in early childhood education. And one of the reasons he is considered to be sort of like he's one of him and Jean Piaget are the founder or the godfathers of early childhood, because in the perfect world, when you're born, you have, and the trust versus mistrust is usually birth to 18 months. That's all of the stuff you're born with, and the things that get modeled for you, and like you're like this, like a ball of clay get molded into, so to speak. In order to move through these stages, you have to go through them successfully. Occasionally, we might skip a stage, but whenever we run into problems, it's because we didn't get something addressed at a lower stage. Well, as teachers, one of the things that we're constantly reminded to do is that when, we are supposed to get these kids at industry versus inferiority. Am I going to be industrious, or am I not going to be successful? And so many times we may have to help students address the 3 stages below that in order for us to be effective. It's not fair, it's just the way that it is. And so for kids who have never had an opportunity to trust, we have to show them that we are the reliable
I mean,
adult.
I mean, I think with a lot of this, it's
Mm-hmm.
like this is like I'm a bit biased, but it's
Uh-huh.
like just change the American education system and make it more like Britain. And like
Well, you still would have, but you know what? You still would have to
more
have
choice, more
more.
choice rather
Well,
than
but
everything being
again, that's in order.
standardized.
But see, you're looking at industry versus inferiority. The choice would come in at identity and role confusion, and it giving them more opportunities. But we're talking, but I guess what I'm saying is, I believe that our functions that we
Right,
have develop or correlate to these ages and stages of life. And
right,
so what we start off with as our primary, by the end, hopefully by the time we are at that age of integrity versus despair, we have gone through all of our functions as well. I'm not saying that there's a one-to-one correlation, as much as I'm
right.
saying that that's the lens that I look through. In addition to these functions and the order in which we develop them, we're also
Yeah,
going through life stages.
yeah.
And it just
Yeah.
happens that we've got 8 and 8.
I
And
just think, I just think
mhm,
that there's certain types, certain people who's like you're making them learn subjects that they're not interested in, and
right,
it's like there needs to be more specialization.
right.
Where, like, for example, when I was 13 or 14, I think when I was 13, I would choose my GCSE options.
Hmm.
Now I had to do maths, English, and the sciences because those were the base subjects. But I chose CDT, craft design and technology,
Hmm.
computer studies, and history. And that was what I would study, as well as those base subjects, up to the age of 16. And then when at the age of 16, I had to have problems because I was ill with epilepsy during my exams.
Hmm.
And so I only did 2 A levels rather than 3.
Hmm.
But for my A levels from 16 to 18 was biology and chemistry. But you could have had an NT maybe pick physics, maths, chemistry, and you could have maybe somebody else, like say an ESFP,
Hmm.
drama, music, PE
Right.
for 2 years. And it's like, whereas I get the impression in America, it's like more one size fits all, making the ESFPs do algebra. And it's like, they're
Yeah,
not
it's
going to
crazy.
have
That's
much
crazy.
fun at
But
that.
again, like I said, that starts in your industry versus inferiority and your identity versus role confusion phases. That in terms of the age, because in a industry versus inferiority is 5 to 13 years, and then 13 to 21 is identity versus role confusion. In addition to the time that you are trying to find out who you are and what your role is, this is
Right.
where you
Right.
need to have more input.
Also, I had an INFJ teacher ask me,
Uh-huh.
how do I make the 8s more interested in my course? And it's like, and I said to her, look, for start, you should be making everyone do Marxist theory of flipping English. No wonder the STPs and ENTJs are giving you a little bit of pushback on that, in that why are you making people at university study a Marxist interpretation of English? Talk about bias in education.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a little bit cranky now.
Oh, I'm with you. Yeah,
I've got to go. It's like
that's so
nearly
well,
2 o'clock in the morning.
right. Well, and I was going to say, and I'm going to I've got another chart that I'm going to share with you
Okay,
that
one
maybe you
more.
can share later, because it actually goes along with what the gentleman said, Retro Gamer 71,
Yeah.
because there's a chart that pulls all of those, that pulls the Jungian archetypes along with the stages of life together.
Yeah. So I just think that if there's more, so another example is like when I talked about 14 to 16, 14-year-olds in England, at least when I was at school, they could do your more vocational subjects and do like your sort of like, well, I think it was called like GMVQs and stuff. And even if they didn't go to sixth form college, they could go to like at 16 to 18, they could do more vocational kind of courses.
Right.
And there needs to be more vocational training in the United States.
Oh, I agree. Well, there's a move, especially like in my school system, for CTAE, career technology, agricultural education, and I have been thankful. I had a mentor that yacked me by my ponytail years ago and told me to make sure that I advocate for kids to go to post-secondary education, not to go to college. As in, post-secondary education includes all of the things that will make them productive for society, whether it be college, whether it be a training program, whether it be a 2-year degree, whether it be the military. That it's important. So I think that we do a good job where we are. Plus, I still live in an area that's very rural. We do have farms and things here. The facility is beautiful, state of the art, but it's not uncommon to see the young lady take the pigs for a walk.
Right, then we'll leave on that.
We'll leave on that.
Image.
But I'm going to share that thing so that we can.
Right.
And
one more.
Okay.
Coming up towards 4 hours.
Oh my goodness! I'm sorry.
You're the NJ, I'm the NP.
I know, isn't that crazy? Yeah, but you got me excited, so I'm sorry.
Okay.
All righty.
Okay, we'll stop now, folks.
We'll stop that.
Right, we're going to end